I spent $15,000 on catering and stayed up all night setting up the perfect Easter egg hunt for my family. As the guests arrived at my $3 million Seattle home, my husband of 10 years pulled me into the living room and confessed he had been sleeping with my younger sister for 2 years. He demanded a divorce and the house because she was pregnant. But the real shock came when my parents walked in and told me to pack my bags because my infertile body was standing in the way of my sister having a complete family. My name is Amelia, 34 years old, and until that Sunday, I actually believed my family loved me. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had your heart shattered by the people who were supposed to protect you. You will definitely want to stick around to hear how I taught my treacherous family that crossing me was the biggest financial and personal mistake they could ever make. The morning sun was reflecting off the pristine waters of Lake Washington, casting a golden glow over the manicured lawns of our estate. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, meticulously hiding hundreds of pastel-colored eggs behind rose bushes and under the sprawling oak trees for my nieces and nephews. I wanted this Easter Sunday to be flawless. I had just handed over my platinum credit card to the head caterer, authorizing the massive charge for the gourmet brunch buffet, complete with a carving station, a custom omelet bar, and towers of imported pastries. My husband Liam was standing by the patio doors, swirling his coffee and looking at me with an expression I could not quite read. At 36, Liam was a handsome, ambitious vice president at a mid-sized tech company. He loved the status our home gave him. He loved hosting these lavish family events, acting like the generous patriarch. He always assumed his corporate salary was the primary pillar of our lifestyle, viewing my supply chain logistics work as a modest little venture that kept me busy. I never corrected him. I preferred to keep the true scale of my corporate empire entirely to myself. It was a safety net I built long before he ever put a ring on my finger. As I adjusted the floral centerpieces on the dining table, Liam walked over and grabbed my wrist. His grip was tighter than usual. "We need to talk," he said, his voice stripped of any warmth. "Now." "Amelia, come to the living room." I followed him, expecting a complaint about the caterers or a forgotten guest. Instead, he closed the heavy mahogany doors behind us, shutting out the cheerful sounds of the string quartet warming up on the terrace. He did not sit down. He did not look apologetic. He just stood there with his arms crossed and dropped a bomb that should have destroyed my world. "I am in love with Lily," he said bluntly. "We have been seeing each other behind your back for the last 2 years. I stared at him, trying to process the words. Lily was my 30-year-old sister. The sister I had helped support, the sister who always seemed to need a bailout or a shoulder to cry on. Before I could even form a sentence, Liam delivered the second blow. "She is pregnant, Amelia. She is carrying my child. I am filing for divorce on Monday." I stood frozen on the Persian rug. 10 years of marriage erased in 2 sentences. But Liam was not finished. He stepped closer, his eyes cold and calculating. "Since you cannot give me a family, it is only fair that we end this quickly. I want you to move out by the end of the week. Lily and I are going to raise our baby in this house. It is the perfect environment for a child, and honestly, my salary pays for the bulk of this lifestyle anyway. You can take whatever furniture you want for your new apartment." The sheer audacity of his demand was staggering. He was kicking me out of my own home to move my sister in. I opened my mouth to tell him exactly who owned the deed to this estate, but the heavy living room doors swung open before I could speak. My parents, Thomas and Linda, walked into the room. I looked at them, expecting to see shock or outrage on their faces. I expected my father to grab Liam by the collar. I expected my mother to comfort me. Instead, they walked in with calm, deliberate steps. They already knew. My mother, Linda, adjusted her expensive silk scarf, looking at me with the same disdain she had shown me since childhood. "Do not make a scene, Amelia," she said, her voice dripping with irritation. "We already know everything." Liam came to us respectfully and explained the situation. You need to sign the house over to them without a fight. I felt the air leave my lungs. You knew, I whispered. You knew my husband was sleeping with my sister, and you are taking their side. My father. Thomas let out an exasperated sigh. Be realistic, Amelia. Lily is carrying the first biological grandchild of this family. You have known for years that you are infertile. Your body simply cannot do what a woman is supposed to do. Are you really going to stand in the way of your sister having a complete traditional family just because you are bitter? Linda stepped closer, her eyes narrowed. You have always been so selfish focusing on your little delivery business instead of fixing your medical issues. Lily is young, she is vibrant, and she is giving Liam what he deserves. The least you can do is leave this house gracefully. You do not need a massive suburban estate to live alone. Pack your bags, sign the transfer papers Liam gives you, and let your sister have the life she is meant to have. They stood there as a united front. My husband, my father, and my mother all demanding I surrender my home, my dignity, and my life to reward my sister for her ultimate betrayal. They expected me to break down crying. They expected the obedient, quiet daughter who always absorbed their insults to just nod and walk away. They thought they held all the power. They thought Liam and his tech salary were the only things keeping a roof over my head. But as I looked at their smug, self-righteous faces, the initial shock evaporated, replaced by a deep, freezing calm. I did not shed a single tear. I just smiled. The heavy mahogany doors creaked open once more, breaking the stifling silence in the room. Lily stepped over the threshold wearing a designer pastel dress she had undoubtedly purchased with Liam's credit card. She looked absolutely radiant, practically glowing with the audacity of a woman who had just detonated her sister's life. Without a hint of shame, she walked straight past me and tucked herself right under Liam's arm. He kissed the top of her head instinctively, a sickening display of their hidden life together. Lily rested her manicured hand on her perfectly flat stomach, rubbing it in slow, deliberate circles. She looked at me with a sickeningly sweet smile that masked pure venom. You really should not be so surprised, Amelia Lily said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. If you had not been so utterly obsessed with your little shipping boxes, maybe you would not have lost your husband. A man needs a real woman to come home to. He needs warmth and a family, not a cold workaholic who spends her nights playing logistics coordinator for a petty delivery service. You drove him into my arms. My mother nodded in agreement, crossing her arms over her chest. Your sister is right. You neglected your duties as a wife. You cannot blame Liam for finding comfort where it was freely given. I looked at the four of them standing there, a united front of absolute delusion. The hypocrisy was so thick, it was suffocating. I did not scream. I did not throw the antique vase sitting on the console table, even though my hands twitched with the urge to shatter something. I simply stared at Lily, letting a cold, humorless smile spread across my face. You always did excel at taking what belongs to me, Lily, I said, my voice dangerously soft. It is exactly like what happened when we were 18. Lily's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. My parents stiffened. They hated it when I brought up the past, mostly because the past was a glaring record of their parental failures. I took a slow step forward, looking directly into my father's eyes. Do you remember that, Dad? I had worked 3 jobs in high school to save up for my college tuition? I had $60,000 sitting in an account. And then your precious Lily decided she wanted to live like a socialite. She racked up $50,000 in credit card debt, buying designer bags and booking luxury trips. When the banks threatened her with fraud charges, you and Mom did not hesitate. You drained my entire college fund to pay off her debts, so your golden child would not face the consequences of her own actions. You stole my education to protect a thief, and now you think you can walk into my home and steal my property to protect her again? You shut your mouth. Amelia, my father barked, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. How dare you speak to us with such disrespect? We raised you. We put a roof over your head. And now you are trying to take the roof over my head, I shot back, keeping my tone perfectly level. My father stepped forward, pointing an aggressive finger at my face. Do not act like you own this estate, he growled. You are completely delusional if you think your small-time packing business bought this $3 million house. Liam makes the real money here. His salary at Technova pays the mortgage. His bonuses buy your groceries. If you do not sign those transfer papers quietly and leave with whatever dignity you have left, I will personally hire the best lawyers in Seattle. We will drag you to court. We will sue you for half of everything, and we will make sure you leave this marriage with absolutely nothing. You will be out on the street, Amelia. Do not test me. Liam smirked, clearly enjoying the protection of his father-in-law. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Amelia. Just sign the house over to Lily and me. It is the best thing for the baby. I looked at them. They genuinely believed their own lies. Liam actually thought his vice president's salary funded our lifestyle. He had no idea that his entire company Technova was just a small subsidiary that my massive corporation Apex Logistics had acquired 3 years ago. He had no idea that I signed his paychecks. And my parents had no idea that threatening to sue me for my assets was the equivalent of bringing a butter knife to a nuclear war. But I could not drop the bomb yet. I needed time. I needed to lock down my assets, gather the evidence, and set the trap so perfectly that none of them would ever recover. So I played the part they expected me to play. I forced my shoulders to slump. I let my hands tremble visibly. I looked down at the floor, letting my hair fall forward to hide my dry eyes, and took a sharp, jagged breath. Please, I whispered, making my voice crack with manufactured despair. Please, just stop. I cannot process this right now. 10 years of marriage and you drop this on me on Easter Sunday. I sank onto the edge of the leather sofa, burying my face in my hands. I let out a broken sob. Just give me a few days. Please. I do not know where I am going to go. I do not know how I am going to afford an apartment on my own. Let me just pack my things in peace and figure out my life. Give me until the end of the week to look over the divorce papers. My mother sighed, a sound of profound relief mixed with pity. See, that is the sensible Amelia we know. We are not monsters. We will give you a few days to gather your belongings. Liam checked his luxury watch, a gift I had purchased for his birthday. You have until Friday, he said coldly. Do not try anything stupid. They turned around and walked out of the living room, heading back to the patio to drink my champagne and eat the food I had paid for. They closed the heavy doors behind them, leaving the broken, infertile wife to mourn her ruined life in peace. The moment the latch clicked shut, the fake tears vanished instantly. I sat up straight. My spine was steel. My mind was already calculating the logistics of their absolute destruction. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There was one person conspicuously absent from this Easter celebration. One person who was not standing in the garden sipping mimosas, Lily's husband, Isaiah. Isaiah was a brilliant cybersecurity expert, a quiet, fiercely intelligent African-American man who had always treated me with genuine respect. We had bonded over our shared status as outsiders in this toxic family. More importantly, I knew Isaiah was far too sharp not to notice his wife's erratic behavior. If Lily had been sneaking around with Liam for 2 years, Isaiah definitely had suspicions. He just needed the missing puzzle pieces, and I had them. I scrolled through my contacts and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his deep voice cautious but alert. Hello, Amelia. Isaiah. I said, my voice completely stripped of emotion, echoing the cold calculation in my chest. I think it is time we finally compare notes. I need to meet you right now. The rain was pouring hard against the foggy windows of a rundown diner on the outskirts of Seattle, far away from the manicured lawns and gated communities we were used to. I chose this location specifically because no one from our social circle would ever set foot here. I sat in a cracked vinyl booth in the back corner, a lukewarm cup of black coffee resting untouched in front of me. I did not have to wait long. The bell above the diner door chimed, cutting through the low hum of the rain. Isaiah walked in. He was a tall, strikingly handsome African-American man with an imposing presence that commanded immediate respect. Usually he carried a warm, easygoing demeanor that made him the only tolerable person at our agonizing family gatherings. Today, however, his face was carved from stone. He wore a dark trench coat, rain dripping from the collar, and his jaw was set with a rigid intensity that mirrored the freezing anger currently pumping through my own veins. He slid into the booth across from me. He did not bother with pleasantries. He did not ask how I was doing. He simply unbuttoned his coat, reached inside, and slammed a heavy, thick manila folder onto the sticky formica table between us. I looked at the folder, then up at his dark, calculating eyes. I knew Isaiah said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that barely carried over the ambient noise of the diner. I did not know about the baby Amelia. I did not know they had the sheer nerve to confront you in your own house on Easter Sunday. But I knew about the affair. I leaned back in the booth, crossing my arms. Tell me everything. Isaiah opened the folder. As one of the top cybersecurity architects on the West Coast, Isaiah made a living identifying threats, securing impenetrable networks, and tracking digital footprints. My sister Isabella was a fool to think she could hide anything from a man who spent his days outsmarting professional hackers. 6 months ago, he began sliding a stack of highlighted bank statements toward me. I noticed a subtle discrepancy in our joint savings account. A few $100s missing here, 1,000 there. Isabella claimed she was spending it on spa days and shopping trips with her friends. But the math did not add up. So I dug deeper. I installed a discreet monitoring software on her personal laptop and her phone. What I found was a textbook case of financial bleeding. She was not just siphoning our joint savings, she was systematically draining my 401k retirement fund. I stared at the highlighted numbers. Isabella had always been greedy, but stealing from her own husband's retirement fund was a new level of sociopathic behavior. She transferred nearly $300,000 into a hidden offshore account. Over the last 6 months, Isaiah continued his tone clinical and detached, though his eyes betrayed a lethal fury. I tracked the IP addresses she was communicating with. I intercepted her encrypted messages. That is how I found out about her and Liam. They were planning a future together funded entirely by my retirement savings and whatever they could bleed out of you. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Well, they executed the first phase of their master plan this morning. Liam demanded a divorce and told me he wants my $3 million estate so he can raise his new baby in comfort. My parents backed him up. They expect me to pack my bags and quietly hand over the deed by Friday. Isaiah shook his head, a dark, cynical smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. Your parents have always been blinded by Isabella, but Liam is a special kind of stupid. He is banking on the fact that you will just roll over and play the victim. Liam has always underestimated me, I replied smoothly. He genuinely believes his corporate salary is the only thing keeping us afloat. He thinks I am just a glorified secretary for a struggling delivery service. Isaiah leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Then let me show you exactly what his corporate salary has been buying recently. He reached into the back of the folder and pulled out a single glossy sheet of paper. He slid it across the table. It was a bill of sale and a vehicle registration document. I looked down at the paper and felt my eyebrows knit together in deep confusion. It was a receipt for a brand new custom-ordered Porsche 911. The vehicle was registered under Isabella's name. The purchase date was less than 48 hours ago. I looked at the bottom line. $120,000. Paid in full. A cash transaction. I stared at the number, my mind racing through the financial logistics. I know Liam's salary, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I know exactly what Technova pays him, including his quarterly bonuses. Even if he emptied his personal savings, he does not have $120,000 in liquid cash sitting around. And you just said Isabella was hiding your retirement money offshore. She would not use traceable funds for a domestic luxury car purchase. Isaiah nodded, his expression turning grim. Exactly. The money did not come from my stolen 401k. And it did not come from Liam's standard payroll account. I intercepted the dealership's wire transfer receipt. The funds came from a brand new high-yield joint account opened under Liam's name just 2 weeks ago. A joint account with who I demanded. Isaiah pulled his high-powered laptop from his messenger bag and flipped it open. Let us find out. Find. I immediately pulled my own laptop from my tote bag. We connected to a secure encrypted mobile hotspot Isaiah provided. The diner around us faded away entirely as we transformed the sticky booth into a digital war room. My fingers flew across the keyboard. As the secret CEO of Apex Logistics, the parent company that owned Liam's employer, I had unrestricted invisible access to his corporate financial profiles, tax records, and background data. Isaiah worked his magic on the banking side, bypassing basic security walls to trace the routing number from the Porsche dealership. For 10 minutes, the only sound between us was the rapid clicking of keys and the heavy rain beating against the glass. Got it, Isaiah muttered, hitting the enter key one final time. I bypassed the bank's secondary ledger. I am looking at the origin of the $120,000 wire transfer. I leaned over, staring at his glowing screen. The money originated from a massive lump sum deposit made 14 days ago. The total deposit was $500,000. Where did $500,000 come from? I asked, feeling a cold knot form in the pit of my stomach. Isaiah's eyes scanned the digital documentation. His jaw tightened. Amelia, this is a home equity line of credit, a HELOC loan. I froze. A home equity loan. On which property? Isaiah looked up from the screen, his dark eyes locking onto mine with terrifying gravity. On your estate, Amelia. Liam took out a $500,000 loan against the equity of your $3 million home. That is impossible, I stated, my voice turning to ice. The house is deeded solely in my name through an LLC. Liam is not on the title. The bank would require my explicit notarized signature to approve any borrowing against that property. Isaiah turned his laptop around so I could see the screen clearly. He pulled up the digitized loan agreement. I stared at the glowing PDF document. There at the bottom of the final page, right next to Liam's signature, was my own name. It was my signature. Perfectly replicated. He forged it. I breathed out, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Liam forged my signature to mortgage my house. He stole $500,000 of my equity to buy my sister a sports car. And that is just the tip of the iceberg, Isaiah said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Look at the routing history for the rest of that $500,000. He did not just buy a car. He dumped the remaining $380,000 into a completely unregulated offshore cryptocurrency exchange. We stared at the screen together as the horrific truth settled over us. Liam and Isabella were not just cheating. They were executing a highly coordinated financial crime. They were trying to completely bankrupt me and Isaiah, saddle me with a massive fraudulent debt, and run away with millions. I slowly closed my laptop, the freezing calm returning to my veins, now sharper and far more dangerous than before. They want a war, Isaiah, I said quietly, looking my brilliant brother-in-law in the eye. Isaiah closed his laptop, a ruthless, terrifying smile finally breaking across his face. Let us burn them to the ground. The glowing screen of Isaiah's laptop cast a harsh blue light over the scratched diner table. Rain continued to hammer against the glass window beside us, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the absolute devastation Liam had orchestrated on paper. I stared at the digitized home equity line of credit document, my eyes tracing the perfect damning loops of my own forged signature. It was a masterpiece of deception. Liam had not just traced my handwriting, he had weaponized my trust. Isaiah's fingers flew across his keyboard with the precision of a surgeon. He pulled up the digital notary stamp at the bottom of the final page. You cannot just walk into a major bank and secure a $500,000 loan against a $3 million property without serious authentication, Isaiah said, his voice a low mechanical rumble. The bank requires a certified notary public to verify your physical presence and identification. so I ran a background check on the notary seal attached to this file. Isaiah tapped his screen, bringing up a professional profile. The face smiling back at us belonged to a man named Gregory Barnes. I felt my jaw tighten. Gregory was one of Liam's oldest fraternity brothers. They played golf every other Sunday. Liam had brought his college buddy into our home, poured him my expensive scotch, and together they had committed massive federal fraud right under my nose. He bypassed the bank's security protocols by using a corrupt notary. I stated the reality settling into my bones. Liam knew I rarely checked the physical mail because I route all my corporate logistics through a private post office box downtown. He intercepted the bank approval letters. He intercepted the confirmation notices. He sat across from me at the dinner table every night for the past month, asking about my day while actively plotting to destroy my financial future. "It gets worse," Isaiah replied, his dark eyes fixed on the terminal window running on his screen. "The Porsche your sister is currently driving was just the appetizer. $120,000 is a lot of money, but it leaves $380,000 unaccounted for." Liam did not just leave that cash sitting in a joint checking account. He is arrogant, but he is also greedy. I watched as lines of code reflected in Isaiah's glasses. He pulled up a decentralized financial ledger, a chaotic web of cryptocurrency transactions that looked like absolute nonsense to anyone outside the tech sphere. Liam transferred the remaining $380,000 into an unregulated offshore crypto exchange, Isaiah explained, pointing to a massive outbound wire transfer. He dumped the entire amount into a highly volatile, highly speculative alternative token project. It is essentially a digital pyramid scheme. The developers promise a massive return on investment within a quarter. Liam bought in right at the peak. I let out a sharp, incredulous breath. He sank nearly $400,000 of stolen equity into a trash crypto project. He actually believes he is going to become a billionaire overnight. "He thinks he is the smartest guy in the room," Isaiah said, shaking his head with profound disgust. I tracked his browser history. He has been spending hours on private forums, bragging under anonymous handles about a massive capital injection he just secured. He thinks this crypto coin is going to shoot to the moon. He believes he will double or triple the stolen money, pay off the initial loan, before you ever find out, and walk away with millions in pure profit. The sheer magnitude of Liam's delusion was almost laughable if it were not so incredibly malicious. He had always resented my financial independence. Even though he thought my company was just a minor local shipping service, he hated that I never asked him for money. He hated that I bought our estate with a massive down payment he could not match. He wanted to be the tech titan. He wanted to be the wealthy patriarch who showered his pregnant mistress with sports cars and luxury apartments. And he was willing to burn my life to ashes to fund his pathetic fantasy. Isaiah leaned back against the vinyl booth, crossing his strong arms over his chest. "Do you see the full picture now, Amelia?" he asked quietly. "He plans to force you out of that house by Friday. He wants you to sign a quitclaim deed surrendering your ownership rights to him and your sister. But because the mortgage loan was fraudulently taken out in your name, the debt remains tied to your Social Security number. He intends to push you out the door, leave you drowning in a $500,000 debt, while he and Lily take the estate and run away with the crypto cash. They want to bury you." I looked away from the laptop screen and stared out into the pouring rain. The betrayal from my parents was a deep, aching wound. The betrayal from my sister was a bitter poison. But Liam's betrayal was a calculated execution. He wanted me homeless, bankrupt, and humiliated. He wanted to destroy me so thoroughly that I would never be able to stand back up. I slowly turned my gaze back to Isaiah. A cold, razor-sharp smile stretched across my face. The kind of smile that promised absolute, unmitigated destruction. "He thinks he is untouchable," I said softly, the ice in my voice making the air between us drop 10 degrees. "He thinks he is a financial genius because he holds a fancy vice president title at Technova. He struts around in his tailored suits, looking down on my delivery business, thinking he is the undisputed king of the Seattle tech scene." Isaiah raised an eyebrow, sensing the shift in my demeanor. The raw power I had kept hidden for a decade was finally bleeding through to the surface. What Liam does not know, I continued leaning intimately close to the table, is that Technova is not an independent tech giant anymore. They ran into massive supply chain failures 3 years ago and faced total bankruptcy. They were quietly bought out and restructured by a parent corporation to save their stock value. I watched Isaiah's eyes widen slightly as the realization began to dawn on him. Technova was acquired by Apex Logistics, I stated, my voice ringing with lethal authority. And I am the founder and chief executive officer of Apex Logistics. Liam is not just my cheating husband, he is my employee. I own his contract, I own his bonuses, I own his entire career. Isaiah let out a low, echoing chuckle that vibrated with dark anticipation. He reached out and closed his laptop with a decisive snap. So Isaiah said, a predatory glint shining in his eyes. The vice president just stole $500,000 from his own chief executive officer. Exactly, I replied, picking up my cold cup of coffee. Liam wants to play corporate games. Let us show him what a hostile takeover really looks like. The drive back from the diner was a masterclass in mental compartmentalization. I wiped away the cold, calculating executive and pulled the mask of the shattered, infertile wife firmly back into place. I messed up my hair, rubbed at my eyes until they were bloodshot, and let my shoulders slump forward. When I pushed open this heavy oak front door of my estate, the house was painfully quiet. The caterers were gone. The Easter decorations had been carelessly swept into a pile near the foyer. Liam was sitting at the kitchen island nursing a glass of my most expensive bourbon. He did not even look up when my wet shoes squeaked against the pristine marble floor. "You took your time," he remarked, swirling the amber liquid. "I hope you used that drive to accept reality, Amelia. We need to handle this like adults." I stood there, trembling perfectly on cue, clutching my damp coat around my waist. I walked slowly into the kitchen, keeping my gaze lowered. Liam reached onto the granite counter and slid a thick manila folder toward me. "I have taken the liberty of having my legal team draft a preliminary separation agreement," he said smoothly, his tone as casual as if he were ordering takeout. "Lily and I want to start our new life without any messy court battles. Sign these by Friday, and I will make sure you get a fair cash settlement to help you find a modest apartment." I reached out with shaking fingers and opened the folder. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, and it took every ounce of my self-control not to laugh in his face. Liam was not just asking for a clean break. He was demanding full ownership of the $3 million estate. He was demanding to keep all the luxury vehicles parked in the garage. And the absolute pinnacle of his delusion was buried on page 4. He was requesting monthly spousal support from me. "You want alimony?" I whispered, letting my voice crack with manufactured disbelief. Liam let out a condescending sigh, leaning forward to rest his elbows on the counter. "Amelia, be reasonable. My position as vice president at Technova requires a certain lifestyle. My salary is substantial, yes, but raising a child is expensive. Lily needs comfort. You run a tiny local packing service. You have no dependents. It is only fair that you contribute to the transition since I have carried the financial burden of this marriage for 10 years. You could never survive in a house like this without my paycheck anyway. You should be thanking me for giving you an easy way out." I let a single tear spill over my eyelashes and roll down my cheek. I looked away, biting my lip as if trying to hold back a sob. "I cannot sign this today, Liam," I said, my voice trembling with perfectly calibrated despair. "Please. My entire world has just fallen apart. You and my sister. The baby. I just need a minute to breathe." Liam rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed by my emotional display. He hated dealing with tears, which made this performance incredibly effective. "I told you have until Friday, but I am not going to pause my life because you are struggling to cope." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I know," I whimpered. "I just ask one thing. Just let me sleep in the master bedroom tonight. Let me have one night to process this before I start packing boxes. You can take the guest suite downstairs. I will even pack your overnight bag and bring your work things down so you do not have to see me cry. Liam considered this for a moment. His arrogance made him remarkably lazy. The idea of me carrying his bags like a dutiful broken servant appealed to his heavily inflated ego. Fine, he agreed, finishing his bourbon and slamming the glass onto the counter. Bring my suits and my briefcase down to the guest suite. I have a major remote meeting with the executive board tomorrow morning, and I do not want you interrupting it with your hysterics. Thank you, I whispered, keeping my head bowed as he walked past me. The second his footsteps disappeared down the hallway, the tears vanished instantly. My face went completely blank, the vulnerability replaced by pure calculating ice. I walked upstairs to the master suite with purposeful, silent steps. Liam had carelessly left his leather briefcase sitting on our bed. I unclasped the brass buckles and pulled out his company-issued laptop. As the secret CEO of Apex Logistics, the parent company that secretly owned Technova, I possessed the highest level of administrative clearance across our entire global corporate network. I did not need Liam to give me his passwords. I did not need to guess his security questions. I pulled a small encrypted flash drive from my pocket and plugged it directly into the side of his machine. With a few swift, practiced keystrokes, I bypassed the standard employee firewall and initiated a silent, untraceable enterprise extraction protocol. This was not just basic commercial spyware. This was military-grade corporate surveillance software designed by my top engineers to root out high-level industrial espionage. The program immediately burrowed into the core registry of his laptop. It linked directly to his corporate email accounts, his encrypted messaging apps, his private cloud storage, and his internal accounting software. The progress bar flashed across my screen, downloading gigabytes of hidden data in mere seconds. I watched with grim satisfaction as the network of his fraud began to materialize right before my eyes. The initial ping of data hit my secure server, and the numbers were absolutely staggering. Liam had not just taken out a fraudulent home equity loan against my property. The extraction software flagged dozens of offshore wire transfers, falsified vendor contracts, and dummy corporate accounts. He had been using his vice president credentials to actively bleed his own department dry. I safely ejected the flash drive and slipped it securely back into my pocket. I neatly packed his tailored suits, his expensive toiletries, and his now completely compromised laptop into a duffel bag. I carried the bag down the stairs, playing the role of the defeated, discarded wife perfectly. Liam was sitting on the edge of the guest bed, scrolling through his phone with a smug smile on his face. He was probably texting my sister about his flawless victory. I set the bag down quietly and walked away without saying a single word. My trap was firmly set, the data was flowing into my servers, and Liam was blissfully unaware that he had just handed me the undeniable proof needed for his absolute destruction. I locked the door to my private home office and poured myself a fresh cup of black coffee. The digital clock on my desk read 2 in the morning. Outside, the Seattle rain had turned into a steady, relentless downpour. Inside, my dual monitors illuminated the dark room with lines of raw, unfiltered corporate data. The extraction software I had planted on Liam's laptop was working flawlessly, syncing directly with the secure server Isaiah had established. Every email, every hidden spreadsheet, every deleted secure message was currently flooding into my database. I sat back in my leather chair and began to sift through the digital wreckage of my husband's career. At first glance, Liam's files looked like standard executive overflow. He had quarterly projections, marketing budgets, and vendor contracts. But as the chief executive officer of the parent company that owned his division, I knew exactly what a clean ledger was supposed to look like. Technova had strict vendor onboarding protocols. Liam's department, however, had authorized a massive surge in outsourced consulting fees over the past 18 months. I ran a targeted algorithm to isolate every vendor contract Liam had personally approved since the timeline of his affair with Lily began. The software flagged a glaring anomaly within seconds. A company named Horizon Consulting had been billing Technova for arbitrary software optimization services every single month. The invoices were perfectly formatted, always falling just a few $100s below the threshold that would require secondary executive approval from the Central Apex Logistics Accounting Department. I pulled up the corporate registration for Horizon Consulting. The company was registered in Delaware, a state known for its protective corporate anonymity laws. But Liam was not dealing with a normal external auditor. He was dealing with a furious, betrayed woman who literally owned the network he was using to commit his crimes. I bypassed the standard public records and accessed the internal routing logs from the emails sending the monthly invoices. The digital address traced back to a luxury high-rise apartment building in downtown Seattle. I ran the address through the residential property database. The penthouse suite was leased to a woman named Lily, my sister. I leaned closer to the monitors, my heart beating with a steady rhythmic precision. Liam had not just taken out a fraudulent mortgage on my estate. He had set up a fake consulting firm, registered it under an anonymous shell company, and used his vice president credentials to approve fake invoices. He was actively stealing corporate funds and channeling them directly into my sister's bank accounts. I initiated a comprehensive audit of every single payment routed to Horizon Consulting over the last 2 years. The numbers tallied up on my screen, climbing higher and higher until the final sum settled in bold red font: $1.5 million. My husband had embezzled $1.5 million from his own employer. He had stolen from my company to fund a lavish secret life with my sister. I opened a secondary window and cross-referenced the dates of the corporate payouts with Lily's social media timeline. The correlation was absolute perfection. 2 days after Liam authorized a $50,000 payout for fake software consulting, Lily posted photos from a first-class trip to Paris. A week after a $100,000 invoice cleared, she posted a video of herself unboxing a diamond tennis bracelet. The luxury apartment, the designer clothes, the 5-star vacations. It was all funded by stolen corporate cash. The sheer stupidity of his plan was almost breathtaking. Liam actually believed he was a master manipulator pulling the strings of corporate finance, outsmarting the system. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea that every single dollar he stole was meticulously tracked, logged, and backed up on servers that I personally controlled. I sat in the glow of the monitors, processing the magnitude of what I had just uncovered. This was no longer just a messy divorce. This was no longer a simple case of a cheating spouse trying to steal a house. What Liam had done crossed state lines. He had used the internet and banking systems to funnel stolen corporate assets into a shell company. This was wire fraud. This was money laundering. This was corporate embezzlement on a massive scale. These were not civil disputes to be argued over in family court. These were federal crimes, the kind of crimes that carry mandatory minimum prison sentences, the kind of crimes that end with seized assets and handcuffs. A normal person might have panicked. A normal wife might have stormed downstairs, thrown the printed evidence in his face, and demanded answers. She might have called the local police department to report the theft. But I was not a normal wife, and I was certainly not going to let a local police precinct mishandle a multi-million-dollar corporate fraud case. I wanted absolute, inescapable annihilation. I opened a highly encrypted communication channel on my terminal. I did not draft a dramatic email. I did not write a lengthy, emotional plea. I operated with the clinical detachment of a corporate titan, eliminating a fatal liability. I compiled the forged home equity loan documents, the fake Horizon Consulting invoices, the routing logs, the offshore cryptocurrency transfers, and the direct deposit receipts linking Liam's corporate approvals to Lily's luxury assets. I organized the data into a pristine, undeniable digital dossier. Every file was clearly labeled, every transaction highlighted, every piece of evidence neatly tied together with an irrefutable digital bow. I attached the complete forensic accounting report generated by my system. I addressed the encrypted transmission directly to the white-collar crime division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Seattle. I bypassed the standard tip lines and sent it to a senior federal agent I had previously collaborated with during a massive supply chain security overhaul for Apex Logistics. I added a single brief note to the file. Please find attached documented evidence of ongoing corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and mortgage fraud, totaling over $2 million by a corporate executive. The suspect represents a significant flight risk due to recent offshore cryptocurrency movements. All internal corporate cooperation will be provided upon request. I hovered my mouse over the send button. I thought about Liam downstairs sleeping soundly in my guest room, dreaming about moving his pregnant mistress into my home. I thought about my parents ready to throw me out on the street to protect their golden child. I thought about Lily rubbing her stomach and wearing clothes bought with money stolen from my empire. I clicked send. The progress bar zipped across the screen, confirming the encrypted package had been successfully delivered to the federal authorities. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the quiet darkness of my office. I was not going to say a word to Liam. I was not going to warn my parents. I was going to let the federal agents build their watertight indictment in silence. The trap was set, the authorities were armed, and all I had to do now was wait for the perfect moment to watch their entire world burn. The sharp ringing of my phone broke the morning silence. I glanced at the screen, watching my mother's name flash against the dark glass. It was Tuesday, 2 days since the Easter Sunday massacre, and I was sitting at my kitchen island, drinking espresso. I answered the call, pressing the phone to my ear without saying a word. Amelia Linda snapped, her voice devoid of any maternal warmth. I am calling to make something absolutely clear. Your father and I are hosting our 35th wedding anniversary dinner this Saturday at the country club. I am officially uninviting you. I took a slow sip of my espresso, letting the bitter taste wash over my tongue. Is that so? I asked, my voice perfectly steady. Yes, it is, my mother replied sharply. Lily and Liam will be attending together. They are going to use the evening to officially announce the pregnancy to the extended family. We cannot have you sitting there radiating jealousy and ruining the mood. You need to accept that Liam has moved on. He is providing for your sister in a way you never could. It would be incredibly selfish of you to show up and cause a scene. Before I could even process the sheer cruelty of using their own anniversary party to parade my cheating husband and pregnant sister, I heard my father shouting in the background. Tell her she needs to sign the house papers by Friday, Thomas bellowed. Tell her not to test us. A rustling sound echoed through the speaker as my father grabbed the phone from my mother. Amelia, listen to me, Thomas demanded, his voice thick with unearned arrogance. You have always been stubborn, but you need to understand that you are completely out of your league. Liam is a financial genius. You have no idea the kind of wealth he is generating for this family. I raised an eyebrow, staring out the window at the gray Seattle sky. Wealth, I repeated, injecting just enough doubt into my voice to egg him on. Yes, wealth, my father sneered. Liam brought us in on a highly exclusive investment opportunity, a massive digital asset project. It is going to yield returns that your little delivery company could not generate in a lifetime. We are partnering with our future son-in-law to build generational wealth. We put our money where our mouth is, Amelia. By next month we will be multimillionaires, so do not think for 1 second that you can intimidate Liam or use your lawyers against him. We have his back. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, staring at the black screen for a long, silent moment. They had invested with Liam. My parents, who had spent decades lecturing me about fiscal responsibility, who had drained my college fund to pay for Lily's designer bags, had handed their money over to a man running a digital pyramid scheme. I walked briskly up the stairs and locked myself back inside my home office. I fired up my dual monitors and opened the encrypted communication channel with Isaiah. Within seconds, his secure connection pinged on my screen. Isaiah, I said, leaning into the microphone. My father just bragged on the phone that he and my mother invested in Liam's cryptocurrency project. I need to know exactly where their capital came from. My parents do not have massive liquid savings. They live off my father's modest pension and Social Security. Find their funding source. Give me 5 minutes, Isaiah replied, his keyboard already clacking rapidly on the other end of the line. I paced the length of my office, my mind racing. Thomas and Linda had always been obsessed with appearances. They drove a luxury car they leased. They wore clothes they bought on credit. The only real asset they actually owned was their house in the suburbs. It was a modest 4-bedroom property they had paid off over 30 years. It was their ultimate safety net. The ping of an incoming file transfer broke my concentration. Isaiah's voice came through the speaker, sounding colder than I had ever heard it. Amelia, you are going to want to sit down for this. I slid into my leather chair and opened the document Isaiah had just intercepted from the county clerk's digital registry. They did not just hand Liam a few $1,000s from a savings account. Isaiah explained, his tone heavy with disbelief. Thomas and Linda authorized a cross-collateralization agreement. They leveraged the entire equity of their paid-off home to secure a commercial line of credit for Liam. They acted as the primary guarantors. They essentially handed the bank the deed to their house to fund his offshore crypto gamble. I stared at the digitized loan agreement on my monitor. There were my parents' signatures, bold and legally binding, pledging their only physical asset to a volatile digital token. If Liam failed to repay the commercial line of credit, the bank would not go after his corporate salary. The bank would instantly trigger a foreclosure protocol on my parents' suburban home. They had literally bet the roof over their heads on the promises of a cheating, embezzling narcissist. How much did they borrow? I asked, my voice a hollow whisper. $400,000, Isaiah confirmed. Which means Liam combined their $400,000 with the $500,000 he stole from your home equity line. He dumped nearly $1 million into that trash coin. I switched tabs on my browser, opening a live cryptocurrency market tracking terminal. I needed to see exactly what kind of generational wealth my father thought he was building. I pulled up the specific offshore alternative token Isaiah had identified the night before. The ticker symbol blinked onto my screen, followed by a detailed real-time financial chart. I looked at the line graph, and a sudden sharp breath escaped my lips. The graph did not show a steady climb. It did not show a minor dip. The line on the screen dropped straight down like a stone thrown from a cliff. Isaiah, I said, my voice steadying into a blade of pure ice. Pull up the market history for the token Liam bought. I hear you typing? Isaiah muttered. A few seconds passed, then a sharp intake of breath echoed through the speakers. Good Lord. The project was a rug pull, I stated, staring at the catastrophic red numbers bleeding across my monitor. The anonymous developers who launched the token had waited for a massive influx of capital from arrogant fools exactly like Liam. Once the liquidity pool reached its peak, the developers drained every single dollar from the system and vanished into the dark web. The value of the token was completely wiped out. When did the crash happen? Isaiah asked, though I could already see the timestamp on the market ledger. 48 hours ago, I replied, a ruthless smile curving my lips. The entire project collapsed to absolute zero on Sunday night, just hours after Liam demanded a divorce and my parents told me to pack my bags. They have lost everything. Every single penny is gone. The bank is holding a $400,000 marker, and Liam has nothing but a worthless digital receipt. If the bank does not get their payment by the end of the billing cycle, they will seize my parents' house. They are going to be homeless, Isaiah said, a dark sense of poetic justice coloring his words. And they do not even know it yet. Thomas is busy bragging about becoming a millionaire, completely unaware that he just signed away his retirement. I closed the market terminal and leaned back in my chair. My parents had proudly uninvited me from their anniversary dinner so they could celebrate my replacement. They wanted to toast to their golden child, their brilliant future son-in-law, and their newfound wealth. They wanted to humiliate me one final time before casting me out of the family forever. Let them have their party, I told Isaiah, my eyes fixed on the rain washing down my office window. Let them buy the expensive champagne. Let Lily wear her stolen diamonds. Let Thomas give a grand speech about his financial genius. I am going to attend that anniversary dinner anyway, and I am going to bring the foreclosure notice as my gift. Wednesday morning arrived with the crisp, unforgiving clarity that only a Seattle sunrise could bring. I dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, the kind of armor I usually reserved for hostile corporate acquisitions. Today, the target of the acquisition was my own freedom. I bypassed my usual office at Apex Logistics and drove straight to the downtown headquarters of my private legal counsel. The firm occupied the top 3 floors of a towering glass skyscraper, a physical manifestation of absolute legal power. My lead corporate attorney, Harrison, was already waiting for me in the main boardroom. The sprawling mahogany table was covered with thick stacks of financial portfolios, property deeds, and corporate holding documents. Harrison knew the truth about my marriage. He knew exactly what Liam was planning, and more importantly, he knew how to legally obliterate him. We have 72 hours before Liam officially files his standard divorce petition on Friday, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. I want every single asset I own fortified. I want it done by noon. Harrison slid a heavy leather-bound document toward me. He did not ask questions. He simply executed my orders with ruthless efficiency. We are transferring your entire equity stake in Apex Logistics, along with your secondary real estate holdings and offshore investment portfolios, directly into a blind, irrevocable trust. I picked up the solid gold pen resting beside the document. In American family law, an irrevocable trust is the ultimate financial fortress. Once my assets were transferred into this specific trust structure, they legally ceased to be my direct personal property. They belonged to the trust managed by an independent fiduciary board that I had handpicked years ago. Because the assets technically no longer belonged to me as an individual, they could not be considered marital property. They were completely, absolutely untouchable by any divorce court, any judge, and most importantly, any greedy, cheating husband. Liam thinks he is going to walk away with half of a modest local delivery service. Harrison noted a dry, humorless smile touching his lips. When his bargain bin divorce lawyer tries to subpoena your financial records during discovery, they are going to find a checking account with exactly $5,000 and a leased sedan. The multi-billion-dollar supply chain empire simply will not exist on paper. I signed my name on the dotted line, sealing away my fortune behind an impenetrable wall of corporate law. Let him fight for half of $5,000, I replied smoothly. Let him pay his legal fees with the imaginary cryptocurrency he bought with stolen money. We spent the next 4 hours untangling the minor visible assets. I legally severed my name from the joint checking accounts that held only enough cash to cover basic monthly utility bills. I isolated my personal credit profiles. I ensured that the fraudulent $500,000 home equity line of credit Liam had forged remained entirely isolated, setting the stage for the federal fraud charges that were already quietly brewing at the FBI field office. By the time the clock struck noon, I was legally a ghost. A very dangerous, incredibly wealthy ghost. As I walked out of the law firm and stepped into the elevator, my secure mobile phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a restricted number. I swiped to answer, knowing exactly who was on the other end. "It is done," Isaiah stated, his deep voice echoing with the unmistakable sound of a man who had just executed a flawless tactical strike. "I am walking out of the King County Courthouse right now." I leaned against the glass wall of the elevator, watching the Seattle skyline drop away beneath me. "Tell me the judge signed the order." Isaiah let out a dark, satisfied breath. "The judge did not just sign the order, Amelia. He fast-tracked it. I filed for an immediate unilateral divorce this morning. But more importantly, my lawyer filed an emergency ex parte motion, citing the dissipation of marital assets." I smiled. Dissipation of marital assets was a specific, devastating legal maneuver. In Washington state, if one spouse can prove that the other is intentionally wasting, hiding, or squandering community property for non-marital purposes, the court can intervene with brutal speed. I handed the judge the complete forensic accounting packet. Isaiah continued, the sound of city traffic humming in the background of the call. I showed the court the $300,000 Isabella secretly wired to an offshore account. I showed them the receipt for the $120,000 Porsche she bought 2 days ago. I proved that she was actively looting my retirement funds to finance an extramarital affair. The judge took one look at the paper trail and slammed his gavel. "What is the status of her accounts?" I asked, stepping out of the elevator and walking toward my waiting car. "A financial guillotine just dropped on her neck," Isaiah said, a cold edge of triumph in his tone. The court granted an immediate total asset freeze to prevent any further capital flight. Every single credit card associated with her name has been locked. Her checking accounts are frozen. Her savings are inaccessible. She cannot withdraw a single dollar, she cannot transfer funds, and she cannot use the joint accounts to pay for her luxury lifestyle. She is currently out shopping for a custom designer gown for my parents' anniversary dinner this Saturday, I noted, pulling my keys from my purse. She expects to parade into the country club looking like a billionaire socialite. "Well," Isaiah replied, his voice dropping into a lethal mocking register, "when she hands that plastic to the cashier at the boutique today, it is going to decline. She has absolutely zero access to capital. She is completely financially paralyzed, and she has no idea that the man she betrayed just cut the ground entirely out from under her." I unlocked my car door and slid into the driver's seat. We had successfully locked down our wealth. We had isolated our enemies. Liam was sitting on a ticking time bomb of federal fraud entirely dependent on a collapsed digital currency. Thomas and Linda had mortgaged their only home for a mirage. And Isabella was a penniless woman driving a stolen sports car she could no longer afford to put gas in. They wanted to play a high-stakes game of deception and greed. They thought they could manipulate the system and discard us like useless collateral damage. But they had miscalculated the intelligence of the people they betrayed. The battlefield was perfectly set. The defense was absolute. Now all that was left was the execution. I started the engine, my mind already picturing the look on their faces when they realized their grand anniversary celebration was going to be the site of their total, inescapable annihilation. Thursday evening blanketed Seattle in a thick curtain of fog and unrelenting rain. I sat alone in the dim glow of my home office, my fingers resting lightly on the cool metal of my desk. The financial and legal barricades were fully operational. My fortune was locked away in the irrevocable trust entirely invisible to the outside world. Liam was sleeping in the guest room downstairs, still believing he held the upper hand. My parents were completely oblivious to the impending collapse of their heavily mortgaged suburban life. I had secured my perimeter perfectly. But a war is never won on defense alone. My secure encrypted mobile phone vibrated silently against the polished mahogany surface, the screen illuminated with a priority alert from Isaiah. I picked up the device and accepted the connection. There was no greeting. There was only the sound of heavy, measured breathing on the other end of the line, followed by the rapid clacking of a mechanical keyboard. "I just sent a high-capacity video file to your private server," Isaiah said, his voice stripped of its usual calm resonance replaced by a low, vibrating intensity. "I thought I had seen the absolute bottom of your sister's depravity when I found the offshore accounts and the stolen retirement funds. I was wrong. What you are about to watch defies logic. It is pure, unadulterated sociopathy." I turned my attention to the large monitor on my left. A notification blinked confirming the arrival of a massive, heavily encrypted video package. I authorized the decryption protocol. "Tell me what I am looking at, Isaiah." "Isabella is vain." Isaiah explained, his tone clinical and sharp. "She cares about appearances above all else." When she realized she needed a solid cover story to accelerate Liam's divorce timeline, she did not go to a standard municipal hospital. She booked a private consultation at a highly exclusive boutique women's health clinic in downtown Seattle. These high-end medical spas pride themselves on absolute client discretion, but they made a fatal error. They contracted their internal security and cloud storage to a third-party vendor with a glaring vulnerability in their administrative firewall. "You hacked a private medical server," I stated, feeling a sudden rush of adrenaline. I did not hack the medical records, Isaiah corrected smoothly. I bypassed the scheduling software and accessed the internal security camera feeds. The cameras in the VIP consultation rooms record high-definition audio and video for liability purposes. I isolated the timestamp of her appointment from yesterday afternoon. Open the file, Amelia. You need to hear this directly from her mouth. I clicked the file. The media player launched, filling my screen with crisp high-definition footage. The camera angle provided a clear overhead view of a pristine white consultation room. A female doctor in a tailored white coat sat behind a sleek glass desk. Across from her sat my sister. Isabella looked immaculate. She was wearing designer sunglasses pushed back onto her head and a cashmere sweater paid for by the money my husband had embezzled. She looked entirely relaxed, casually crossing her legs and sipping from a bottle of sparkling water. There was no maternal glow. There was no nervous anticipation of an expectant mother. The doctor folded her hands on the desk. So, Isabella, what can we do for you today? We have you scheduled for an initial prenatal wellness exam. Isabella set her water bottle down and leaned forward. Her posture was entirely casual, as if she were ordering a latte instead of discussing a medical procedure. Actually, doctor, I am not here for an exam, Isabella said, her voice echoing clearly through the pristine audio feed. I am not pregnant. I froze in my chair. The breath caught in my throat. I pressed my hands flat against my desk, leaning closer to the monitor. The doctor looked confused, her professional demeanor faltering for a fraction of a second. I am sorry, I do not understand. Your intake forms clearly state you are 8 weeks along. I need some medical advice on a highly sensitive personal matter, Isabella continued, completely unbothered by the doctor's confusion. I am currently navigating a very complicated family dynamic. My sister's husband and I are together. He is in the process of finalizing a divorce and securing a very valuable piece of real estate for us. But he needed a push to act decisively, so I told him I was pregnant. My heart pounded against my ribs like a sledgehammer. The sheer breathtaking audacity of her confession paralyzed me. She was sitting in a medical facility openly admitting to weaponizing a fake pregnancy to destroy my marriage and steal my $3 million estate. The doctor shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Ma'am, this clinic cannot provide you with falsified medical documents or participate in any form of deception. I am not asking you to forge a chart. Isabella sighed, rolling her eyes as if the doctor were being incredibly tedious. I already bought fake ultrasound photos online. Liam is too arrogant and clueless to tell the difference. What I need from you is an expert consultation. Once Liam forces my sister out and signs the deed of the house over to me, I cannot exactly produce a baby in 9 months. I need to stage a miscarriage. The room on the screen went dead silent. The doctor stared at my sister in absolute horror. I sat in my office, my blood running cold as ice. I need to know the exact physical symptoms to mimic, Isabella explained, her tone terrifyingly practical. I need to know how much blood is realistic, what kind of pain to describe, and how long the recovery period typically lasts. I need the performance to be flawless, because when I lose this imaginary baby, I am going to blame it entirely on my sister. I let out a sharp, involuntary gasp. Isabella smiled on the screen, a vicious, predatory expression that made my stomach churn. I'm going to tell Liam and my parents that Amelia's hostility and constant harassment caused me so much severe emotional distress that it triggered a spontaneous miscarriage. Liam will be so blinded by grief and rage that he will never forgive her. My parents will cut her off completely. Amelia will be the villain who killed her own nephew, and I will be the tragic grieving mother who needs a $3 million house to recover in. It is the perfect exit strategy. The video feed clicked and went black. The file ended. I sat in the absolute silence of my home office. The rain continued to beat against the glass, but I could not hear it. The only sound in my ears was the roaring rush of my own pulse. Isabella was not just a greedy, spoiled brat. She was a master manipulator constructing a psychological torture chamber designed specifically for me. She knew exactly how deeply my infertility had wounded me. She knew the pain I carried after years of failed treatments. And she decided to use the sacred concept of a child as a weapon to completely obliterate my reputation, alienate me from my parents forever, and secure a massive financial payout. Amelia Isaiah's voice broke through the silence, heavy and dark with barely contained rage. She is a monster. I closed my eyes, taking a slow, deep breath to steady the violent shaking in my hands. My parents had looked me in the eye and told me to surrender my home because I was a broken, infertile woman standing in the way of a true family. Liam had demanded I pack my bags because he wanted to be a father. They had all justified their spectacular cruelty based on a biological lie. I opened my eyes. The shaking stopped. The pain evaporated. There was nothing left inside me but absolute unyielding resolve. Isaiah, I said softly, the lethal calm returning to my voice with devastating force. Save that video to the primary encrypted drive. Do not compress the file. I want the audio to be crystal clear. What is the play? Isaiah asked. My parents are hosting their 35th anniversary dinner this Saturday at the finest restaurant in the city, I replied, staring at my reflection in the dark monitor. The entire extended family will be there. The country club elites, the business partners, everyone they desperately want to impress. They think I am going to walk in there, hang my head in shame, and hand over the deed to my house so Isabella can play the glowing, expectant mother. I stood up from my desk, smoothing the lines of my tailored suit. They wanted a show. I stated, my voice echoing with a promise of absolute destruction. I am going to give them a cinematic masterpiece. Secure the servers, Isaiah. On Saturday night, we burned their entire world to the ground. The grand ballroom at the Sovereign was a monument to Seattle's elite. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the vaulted ceilings, casting a warm golden light over 50 tables covered in imported white linen. Waiters in crisp black tuxedos circulated with silver trays of champagne and caviar. It was the absolute pinnacle of high society, dining a venue that required reservations 6 months in advance, and a minimum spend that would make a normal person choke. For my parents, Thomas and Linda, it was the perfect stage to celebrate their 35th wedding anniversary. It was the perfect stage to parade their imaginary wealth and their golden child. I arrived exactly 45 minutes late. I did not wear the muted, conservative colors my mother always demanded I wear, so I would not outshine my sister. I wore a backless emerald green silk gown that draped flawlessly against my skin. I paired it with diamond drop earrings I had purchased with my first major corporate bonus. My hair was styled in sleek dark waves, and my posture was absolute steel. I did not look like a barren, discarded wife mourning the end of her marriage. I looked like an executioner arriving to collect her dues. In my right hand, I carried a thick, black leather folder. The moment I stepped through the arched double doors, the ambient chatter of the ballroom began to die down. Heads turned. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. The extended family, the country club associates, and the business partners all stopped to stare. I could feel their eyes scanning me, fueled by whatever pathetic fabricated narrative my parents had spun about my absence. Across the room, standing by a towering, multi-tiered cake, was my family. Thomas was wearing a rented tuxedo, holding a glass of scotch, trying to look like a titan of industry. Linda was draped in a sequined gown, her neck dripping with pearls that were undoubtedly bought on a credit card she could no longer afford. And standing right beside them were Liam and Isabella. Liam looked incredibly smug in his tailored suit. Isabella was clinging to his arm, wearing a tight blush pink dress deliberately chosen to accentuate the tiny, non-existent bump of her imaginary child. I saw the exact second my mother spotted me. Her rigid, performative smile instantly dissolved into a mask of pure, undisguised panic. She whispered something sharply to my father. Thomas turned his face, flushing a deep, angry red. Liam's jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle feathering in his cheek. Isabella instinctively took a step back. her hand flying to her flat stomach in a defensive gesture. I did not break eye contact with any of them. I glided across the polished marble floor, the sharp click of my heels cutting through the stifling silence of the room. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. Linda intercepted me before I could reach the main table. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging painfully into my skin, and dragged me slightly to the side. "What are you doing here?" Linda hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that barely masked her desperation. "I explicitly told you that you were uninvited. You are embarrassing us in front of the entire family." I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. "I am not here to eat your catered salmon, Mom," I said, my voice smooth and perfectly level. "I am here to deliver exactly what you and Liam demanded from me." I held up the thick black leather folder. Linda's eyes widened. Her gaze dropped to the folder, and a sudden triumphant gleam ignited in her eyes. The panic vanished, replaced instantly by the arrogant superiority she had worn my entire life. She actually believed I had caved. She believed the folder contained the signed quitclaim deed to my $3 million estate and the uncontested divorce papers. She thought I had shown up to surrender my entire life to her favorite daughter just to beg for a scrap of their approval. "Give me that," Linda snapped, snatching the leather folder forcefully from my hands. "You finally did one thing right in your miserable life, Amelia. It is about time you accepted your place and stopped fighting a losing battle." I did not resist. I let her take the folder, offering her a calm, chillingly vacant smile. "It is all yours, Mom. Every single page." Linda turned her back on me, clutching the folder to her chest like a trophy. She marched straight toward the small elevated stage at the front of the ballroom, where a microphone stood ready for the evening toasts. Thomas, Liam, and Isabella watched her ascend the stairs, their faces relaxing into matching expressions of arrogant victory. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully broken me. "Ladies and gentlemen," Linda announced into the microphone, her voice echoing loudly across the silent, captivated ballroom. "If I could please have your attention." The guests turned toward the stage, waiters stopped moving, the string quartet lowered their instruments. "Tonight is a celebration of family, of endurance, and of legacy," Linda declared, her face glowing under the stage lights. "For 35 years, Thomas and I have built a foundation of love and sacrifice, and tonight we have another beautiful milestone to celebrate." She gestured grandly toward Liam and Isabella. "As many of you know, our family is expanding. My beautiful daughter Isabella and our brilliant future son-in-law Liam are expecting a child. They are going to bring a new life into this world, and they are going to do it in a beautiful, sprawling home that will be the center of our family for generations to come." A smattering of polite applause rippled through the crowd. Isabella beamed, resting her head against Liam's shoulder. Linda held up the black leather folder high above her head for everyone to see. "And I want to take a moment to publicly acknowledge my eldest daughter, Amelia." Every eye in the room pivoted back to me. I stood perfectly still in the center of the floor, my emerald dress gleaming under the chandeliers. For a long time, Amelia struggled to accept the reality of her medical shortcomings. Linda continued, her voice dripping with a sickening performative pity. "But today she has finally done the right thing. She has finally realized that true family requires sacrifice. She has brought the legal documents tonight to officially step aside, to hand over her home, and to yield her happiness so her younger sister can have the complete family that Amelia could never provide." The absolute cruelty of her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Several guests looked down, clearly uncomfortable with the brutal public humiliation of a barren woman. My father nodded approvingly. Liam smirked. Isabella looked like she had just been crowned queen. "Let us raise a glass to new beginnings," Linda concluded, gripping the folder tightly. "And to a daughter who finally learned to put her sister first." The room was dead silent. No one raised a glass. I took a slow, deep breath. I let the silence stretch for 5 agonizing seconds. Then I began to walk. I did not rush. I climbed the 3 carpeted steps to the stage with the predatory grace of a lioness stepping into a cage of trapped prey. Linda frowned, stepping back slightly as I approached the podium. She clearly expected me to cry, to apologize, or to run out of the room in shame. Instead, I reached out and calmly wrapped my hand around the stem of the microphone. I pulled it gently from the stand. I turned to face the hundreds of guests, the business partners, the extended family, and the people who had just listened to my mother verbally execute me. I smiled. It was a radiant, terrifyingly brilliant smile. "Thank you for that touching introduction, Mother," I said, my voice echoing with crystal clear, unwavering authority across the ballroom. "But since you have decided to make my personal finances and my medical history a matter of public record tonight, I think it is only fair that we open that folder and show everyone what true sacrifice really looks like." I turned to my mother, my eyes locking onto hers. "Go ahead, Mom. Open it. Read the first page. Let everyone hear the good news." My mother froze. Her manicured fingers gripped the edges of the black leather folder, but she did not open it. The supreme confidence that had radiated from her only moments ago began to fracture. She looked at my face, searching for a trace of the broken daughter she thought she knew, but she found nothing except absolute zero. The crowd of wealthy Seattle socialites, business partners, and extended family members watched in breathless anticipation, waiting for the grand reveal. I did not wait for my mother to gather her courage. I turned away from the podium and walked purposefully toward the audiovisual control panel set up at the edge of the stage. The restaurant staff had prepared a massive state-of-the-art projection system for my parents to display their 35-year anniversary photo slideshow. Two enormous digital screens hung suspended over the dance floor, currently displaying a glowing monogram of my parents' initials. I pulled my encrypted mobile phone from my emerald clutch. I bypassed the wireless network and plugged my device directly into the primary media interface. "What are you doing, Amelia?" my father demanded, stepping forward from his table. His voice held a warning tone, but it lacked its usual power. "Step away from the equipment. This is our anniversary celebration." I ignored him entirely. With a single swipe of my finger, I overrode the monogram presentation and mirrored my phone screen to the massive projectors. The entire ballroom gasped as the screens flickered from warm gold to the sterile bright white of a clinical medical office. The high-definition video feed began to play. The audio piped directly through the restaurant's surround sound system was incredibly crisp and loud enough to reach every single corner of the grand room. On the massive screens towering over the guests, Isabella sat comfortably in a luxurious leather chair inside a high-end consultation room. She was wearing her designer sunglasses and sipping sparkling water. The female doctor across from her looked professional and attentive. "Actually, doctor, I am not here for an exam," the digital version of my sister announced, her voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "I am not pregnant." A collective synchronized gasp rippled through the ballroom. 50 tables of elite guests went entirely silent. Waiters froze in their tracks, trays of champagne halted mid-air. The elegant atmosphere of the country club instantly transformed into a theater of absolute shock. I turned to look at my family. The color drained from Isabella's face so fast she looked like a corpse. Her hand, which had been resting delicately on her stomach all evening, dropped to her side as if she had been burned. She stumbled backward, bumping into a nearby chair, her eyes wide with pure terror. On the screen, the doctor expressed confusion, mentioning the intake forms that claimed an 8-week pregnancy. Isabella rolled her eyes with profound annoyance, a gesture everyone in the room recognized perfectly. "I need some medical advice on a highly sensitive personal matter." The video, Isabella continued, completely unbothered by the ethical boundary she was crossing. "I am currently navigating a very complicated family dynamic. My sister's husband and I are together. He is in the process of finalizing a divorce and securing a very valuable piece of real estate for us. But he needed a push to act decisively, so I told him I was pregnant." The sound of shattering glass pierced the quiet of the ballroom. My father had dropped his crystal tumbler of scotch, the amber liquid and broken shards scattered across the polished marble floor. My mother clutched her chest, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly as she stared up at the giant screens, displaying her golden child, orchestrating a psychological torture campaign. The folder she had snatched from me slipped from her trembling fingers and landed on the floor with a dull thud. But the video was not finished. I made sure to let it play to the absolute devastating end. Once Liam forces my sister out and signs the deed of the house over to me, I cannot exactly produce a baby in 9 months, the digital Isabella explained to the horrified doctor. I need to stage a miscarriage. I need to know the exact physical symptoms to mimic. I need to know how much blood is realistic, what kind of pain to describe, and how long the recovery period typically lasts. I need the performance to be flawless, because when I lose this imaginary baby, I am going to blame it entirely on my sister. Murmurs of absolute disgust erupted from the audience. A woman in the front row covered her mouth in shock. Several of my father's business partners shook their heads, looking at my family with unadulterated contempt. The perfect, pristine image my parents had spent 35 years cultivating was incinerated in less than 2 minutes. The whispers grew into a loud, judgmental hum that filled the expansive space. The video clicked and the screens went black. I disconnected my phone and walked back to the center of the stage. I looked down at the main table. Isabella was hyperventilating, backing away from the crowd, her eyes darting wildly around the room for an escape route. Linda looked like she might faint, leaning heavily against the linen-covered table for physical support. Thomas was gripping the edge of his chair, staring at his youngest daughter as if she were a dangerous stranger. But Liam's reaction was the most satisfying. My soon-to-be ex-husband stood paralyzed. His handsome face was contorted into a mask of pure, unfiltered horror. He looked at Isabella, then up at the blank screens, then back to Isabella. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him with the force of a freight train. He had destroyed his 10-year marriage. He had publicly humiliated his wife. He had taken out fraudulent loans and embezzled corporate funds to secure a future for a child that did not exist. "You lied to me!" Liam screamed, his voice cracking with a terrifying mixture of rage and panic. He lunged toward Isabella, grabbing her by the shoulders. The pristine, sophisticated vice president was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. "You told me we were having a baby. You made me demand the house. You made me ruin my entire life for a lie." "Liam, please," Isabella sobbed, shrinking away from his tight grip. "I just wanted us to be together. I just wanted to make sure she was gone. I did it for us. You did it for money." Liam roared, his face red and sweating profusely under the ballroom lights. "You psychotic liar. There is no baby." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the wooden podium. I tapped the microphone twice to ensure everyone in the ballroom could hear my next words perfectly. "Do not cry yet, Liam," I said, my voice slicing through his hysterical shouting with a cold, absolute authority. Liam froze instantly, turning his panicked eyes up to the stage. He looked at me, breathing heavily, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline of Isabella's betrayal. "You are acting like a victim because she lied about a pregnancy," I stated smoothly, looking down at him with an expression of pure corporate ruthlessness. "But a fake pregnancy is just a pathetic, desperate lie. It is an embarrassment, but it is not a federal crime. Your crimes, however, are far worse than hers, and your punishment is going to be infinitely more severe." I stepped down from the small stage. The heavy silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. Every single guest was holding their breath. The wealthy elites, the country club members, and the business partners my parents wanted to impress so desperately were all watching me with a mixture of awe and terror. Liam was still standing near the main table. His chest heaved as he stared at me. He was completely broken by my sister and her fake pregnancy confession. But he had no idea that his nightmare was only just beginning. I reached behind the wooden podium and picked up a second folder. This one was not a slim leather binder. It was a thick, heavy manila file, packed with hundreds of pages of raw financial data. I walked slowly across the polished marble floor until I was standing less than 2 feet away from my husband. Liam swallowed hard. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He tried to straighten his posture, desperately attempting to cling to the last shred of his corporate pride. He wanted to look like the successful vice president of Technova, the man who paid the bills, the man who was in control. "You have always loved your job, Liam," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm and carrying across the dead quiet room. "You loved wearing your custom suits. You loved looking down on my small packing and shipping business. You loved telling everyone how your brilliant mind and your massive tech salary funded our $3 million estate." Liam shifted his weight uncomfortably. He glanced at my parents, looking for backup, but Thomas and Linda were completely paralyzed by the destruction of their social standing. "Amelia, stop this right now," Liam warned, though his voice shook uncontrollably. "We can handle our divorce privately. You do not need to do this here." I laughed, a sharp freezing sound that cut through the tension. "There is no divorce settlement to negotiate, Liam. You see, you always thought you were the smartest man in the room. You thought Technova was an independent tech giant that valued your unparalleled genius, but you never bothered to read the corporate acquisition filings from 3 years ago. Technova went bankrupt. They were completely failing until a massive global supply chain corporation stepped in and bought them out to salvage their software patents. That parent company is called Apex Logistics." Murmurs erupted from the tables where my father and his business partners sat. They all knew the name Apex Logistics. It was a multi-billion-dollar empire. I watched the confusion wash over Liam's face. He did not understand why I was giving him a corporate history lesson in the middle of our anniversary massacre. But the realization was about to hit him like a physical blow. "You work for Apex Logistics," I stated clearly. "And I am the founder and chief executive officer of Apex Logistics." The entire ballroom seemed to gasp in unison. My father gripped the edge of his table so hard his knuckles turned white. My mother covered her mouth with both hands. Liam stopped breathing. His eyes widened to an impossible size. The arrogant, condescending tech executive vanished in an instant. He stared at me as if I had just morphed into a ghost. "You cannot be—" Liam stammered, shaking his head in frantic denial. "You run a local delivery route. You do not own Apex." I raised the thick manila file and slammed it directly into his chest. He reflexively grabbed the folder before it could hit the floor. The heavy impact forced him to take a step backward. "Open it," I commanded. "Open your own financial execution." Liam fumbled with the clasp. His hands were trembling so violently that he nearly dropped the entire stack of papers. He flipped open the cover. Sitting right on top was a high-resolution printout of a fake vendor invoice. It was billed to a ghost company called Horizon Consulting. The approval signature at the bottom belonged to him. Beneath that was a direct wire transfer routing slip moving corporate funds straight into an offshore cryptocurrency exchange. Liam looked up at me, his face completely devoid of color. "You have been monitoring my network," he whispered, pure panic strangling his vocal cords. "I own your network," I replied, my voice echoing with lethal authority. "As the CEO, I have unrestricted administrative access to every single server, every email, and every financial ledger in your department. I saw the fraudulent home equity loan you secured using my forged signature and a corrupt notary. I saw the $120,000 sports car you bought for my sister. And I watched you authorize fake invoices to embezzle $1.5 million from your own employer." Liam dropped the folder. The papers scattered across the marble floor, exposing his massive federal crimes to everyone in the front row. Several business executives leaned forward, looking at the printed evidence of his money laundering. Liam fell to his knees. His legs simply gave out under the crushing weight of his reality. He was not just facing a messy divorce or a ruined reputation. He was facing a decade in a federal penitentiary. "Please," Liam begged, looking up at me with tears streaming down his face. "Amelia, please. I will pay it back. I will fix it." I looked down at the pathetic, cowardly man who had betrayed me. My expression remained absolutely composed, radiating the cold, untouchable power of a woman who had just conquered her enemies. You thought you were outsmarting a faceless corporation, Liam, I declared, ensuring every person in the room heard my final judgment. You thought you were stealing company funds. No. You were stealing money straight out of the pockets of the very wife you despised. The heavy oak double doors at the back of the grand ballroom suddenly burst open. The loud resounding crash of the solid wood slamming against the walls jolted every single guest. The string quartet who had been sitting frozen in their chairs physically jumped. I did not flinch. I stood tall on the stage watching my meticulously crafted endgame unfold with perfect precision. Through the grand entrance walked Isaiah. He was a vision of absolute uncompromising retribution. He wore a sharp custom-tailored midnight blue suit that highlighted his commanding presence. His face was a mask of cold, unbreakable stone. Beside him walked a stout, average-looking man holding a thick stack of legal documents securely against his chest. The whispering among the country club elites immediately flared up again. They recognized Isaiah. They knew him as the quiet, respectful African-American cybersecurity expert who always stood politely in the background during my parents' elaborate family events. They had no idea they were about to witness him execute a flawless tactical strike against the family golden child. Isaiah strode down the center aisle of the ballroom with purposeful, heavy steps. He did not look at the extravagant floral centerpieces. He did not look at the towering anniversary cake. His dark, piercing eyes were locked entirely on my sister. Lily had been shrinking against the edge of the main table, desperately trying to distance herself from Liam and his federal embezzlement confession. When she saw her husband walking toward her, a sickening wave of false hope washed over her pale face. Her delusional mind actually believed Isaiah was marching in to rescue her from this nightmare. She thought her sweet, patient husband would shield her from the public humiliation I had orchestrated. Isaiah, Lily cried out, her voice trembling as she took a shaky step toward him. Isaiah, thank God you are here. Amelia has lost her mind. She and Liam are making up horrible lies about me. You have to get me out of here. Please, honey, take me home. She reached out, extending her trembling hands to grab his arm. Isaiah did not reach back. He stopped exactly 3 feet away from her, radiating an aura of absolute disgust. He looked down at the woman he had loved, the woman who had systematically looted his retirement funds to finance her affair, and he did not show a single ounce of mercy. Do not touch me, Isaiah commanded, his deep voice slicing through the ballroom with the force of a physical blow. Do not ever put your hands on me again. Lily recoiled as if she had been slapped. Her mouth fell open in shock. Thomas and Linda, who were still reeling from my corporate revelation, stared at their son-in-law in complete disbelief. Isaiah turned his head slightly and nodded to the man standing beside him. The man stepped forward, looking directly into my sister's panicked eyes. Lily, he stated clearly, his voice carrying the dull, practiced tone of a legal professional. You have been served. He thrust the thick stack of legal documents directly against her chest. Lily reflexively grabbed the papers before they could fall, staring down at the bold black lettering on the front page. It was a unilateral petition for immediate divorce. You thought you were a master criminal, Lily, Isaiah said, his voice dropping into a lethal, mocking register that echoed across the silent room. You thought you could steal $300,000 from my private 401k retirement fund and funnel it into an offshore account without me noticing. You thought you could use my joint savings to book luxury hotels with your sister's husband, and I would just smile and play the oblivious fool. The guests gasped collectively. My mother, Linda, let out a choked, horrified sound, grabbing my father's arm for support. They had no idea the financial betrayal ran this deep. They had no idea their precious youngest daughter was a common thief. I am a senior cybersecurity architect. Isaiah continued, taking a slow, intimidating step closer to her. I build digital fortresses for global financial institutions. Did you honestly believe you could hide your digital footprint from me? I tracked every single transaction. I intercepted every encrypted message you sent to Liam. I watched you plan your little escape using my hard-earned money. Lily began to hyperventilate. The papers in her hands shook violently. Isaiah, please. She begged, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect, expensive makeup. I can explain. It is not what it looks like. I love you. You love my bank accounts, Isaiah corrected sharply. But you do not have access to those anymore. He looked around the room, ensuring my parents and their wealthy friends heard every single word of her financial execution. I filed an emergency ex parte motion this morning, Isaiah declared, his voice ringing with absolute triumph. I handed a superior court judge the complete forensic accounting packet detailing your theft. The judge immediately granted a total asset freeze, citing the dissipation of marital assets. Every single credit card associated with your name was locked at noon today. Your checking accounts are frozen. Your savings are inaccessible. You cannot withdraw a single dollar. Lily let out a sharp, panicked wheeze. But my car! She stammered, her mind scrambling to hold on to any piece of her fabricated luxury life. I have my car. You mean the brand new Porsche you bought 2 days ago using the money Liam stole from Amelia? Isaiah asked, letting out a dark, humorless laugh. I notified the dealership and the bank about the fraudulent origins of the wire transfer. The bank flagged the transaction as a federal crime. They repossessed the vehicle from the country club parking lot exactly 20 minutes ago. You do not even have a steering wheel to your name. No. Lily screamed, a high-pitched, desperate sound that tore through the elegant ballroom. No, you cannot do this to me. I need to go home. I need my things. You do not have a home. Isaiah delivered the final fatal strike. The locks on my house were changed this afternoon. Your designer clothes and your stolen jewelry are sitting in garbage bags on my front porch. You are officially evicted. You are standing here in a dress you bought with stolen money, and you have absolutely nothing else in this world. The reality of her total destruction finally hit her. The fake pregnancy, the stolen money, the luxury sports car, the secure marriage. It was all gone. She had been stripped bare in front of the most powerful people in the city. Lily's knees buckled. The girl who had strutted into the ballroom expecting to be crowned the new matriarch of a $3 million estate collapsed onto the cold marble floor. The divorce papers scattered around her like dead leaves. Mom, Lily shrieked, crawling toward my parents' table, her voice entirely broken and hysterical. Mom, Dad, please help me. They are taking everything. You have to help me. You have to stop them. She grabbed the hem of my mother's sequined gown, sobbing uncontrollably. Linda and Thomas stood completely frozen, staring down at their ruined criminal daughter, entirely surrounded by the spectacular wreckage of their own making. The wails of my sister echoed across the marble floor of the grand ballroom, but they did not evoke a single ounce of pity from me or Isaiah. Lily clutched desperately at the hem of my mother's sequined dress, her fake pregnancy and her stolen luxury life completely shattered. For a moment, Thomas and Linda just stared down at her. The carefully constructed illusion of their perfect wealthy family was evaporating under the bright chandeliers. But instead of feeling shame for raising a thief and a liar, my parents did what they always did. They turned their venom entirely on me. Linda violently yanked her dress away from Lily's grasp and marched toward the stage. Her face was flushed with a toxic mixture of embarrassment and supreme arrogance. The whispers of the wealthy country club guests surrounded her, but she ignored the audience. She pointed a trembling finger directly at my face, her voice shrill enough to make the remaining guests wince. "Are you out of your mind?" Amelia Linda shrieked, completely ignoring the fact that her precious youngest daughter had just been exposed as a manipulative fraud. "How dare you bring this circus into our 35th anniversary dinner? You are going to call your lawyers right now. You are going to retract every single one of these ridiculous accusations against Liam, and you are going to tell the authorities that this was all a massive misunderstanding." Thomas stepped up right beside her, puffing out his chest to project the false authority he had used to intimidate me my entire life. He turned his furious gaze toward Isaiah, attempting to bully the man who had just legally dismantled his favorite child. "And you," Thomas barked at Isaiah, his face a mask of patriarchal rage, You are going to withdraw those divorce papers immediately. You do not just throw your wife out on the street over a temporary lapse in judgment. You took vows. We are family. You two are acting like cold-blooded monsters. Is this what family means to you? Destroying your own sister and your husband just because you have some corporate power and a bruised ego? I looked down at them from the stage. They were truly magnificent in their delusion. Even after watching a high-definition video of Lily planning to fake a miscarriage to frame me, even after seeing irrefutable proof that Liam had embezzled $1.5 million from my company, my parents still demanded that I bow down. They still expected me to absorb the damage so their golden child could walk away unscathed. Isaiah let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through Thomas's bluster. A temporary lapse in judgment, Isaiah asked, his deep voice carrying a terrifying calm. Your daughter stole my retirement fund to finance an affair with your other daughter's husband. She is a criminal, Thomas, and you are a fool for defending her. Thomas ignored Isaiah and looked directly at me. He slammed his hand against the edge of the stage, his eyes blazing with desperate fury. Amelia, you listen to me right now. You are the CEO of that company. You have the power to make these embezzlement charges disappear. You have the money to replace whatever Liam supposedly took. You are going to fix this. You are going to save your sister's marriage, and you are going to protect your husband from federal prison. If you do not drop these lawsuits and fix this mess right now, you are dead to us. We will disown you completely. I stared at the man who had drained my college fund to pay off Lily's credit card debt when I was 18. I stared at the mother who had told me to surrender my home because my infertile body was worthless. They were threatening to disown me completely, oblivious to the fact that I had already erased them from my life long before I walked into this venue. I reached into the hidden pocket of my emerald gown. I pulled out one final perfectly folded piece of paper. It was not a corporate ledger. It was not an FBI indictment. It was a standard municipal legal notice that I had intercepted from the county clerk's office earlier that afternoon. I stepped to the edge of the stage. I looked down at Thomas and Linda, my expression devoid of any human warmth. You want to talk about fixing financial messes, Dad? I asked, my voice slicing through the heavy silence of the ballroom. You want to talk about how my corporate power can save you? You should have thought about that before you handed the deed of your house to a man who was actively sleeping with both of your daughters. I tossed the folded paper into the air. It fluttered down like a dead leaf, landing perfectly on the pristine white tablecloth right in front of Thomas. My father looked down at the document. He did not want to touch it, but the bold red lettering at the top of the page was impossible to ignore. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Thomas, she whispered, her voice trembling with sudden, unadulterated terror. What is that? What does that mean? Thomas picked up the paper with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the legal text, and all the arrogant, patriarchal rage drained out of his body in an instant. He looked like a man who had just been shoved out of an airplane without a parachute. His face turned an ashen gray. I leaned down, resting my forearms on the edge of the stage, making sure every guest in the front row heard my next words. You told me on the phone that you and Liam were building generational wealth, I stated, my voice echoing with ruthless precision. You bragged that you were going to be multimillionaires by next month, but you did not use your savings to fund his offshore cryptocurrency project. Did you, Dad? You and Mom signed a cross-collateralization agreement. You leveraged the entire equity of your paid-off home to secure a commercial line of credit for Liam. You bet the roof over your heads on a digital pyramid scheme. Liam, who was still kneeling on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of his embezzlement, let out a choked, panicked sob. He knew exactly what was coming. That project was a rug pull, I declared, looking directly into my parents' wide, horrified eyes. The anonymous developers drained the liquidity pool and vanished. The token crashed to absolute zero 48 hours ago. Your investment is gone. The $400,000 you borrowed against your home evaporated into the dark web. Liam cannot pay back the commercial line of credit because I have frozen all of his stolen assets and the bank does not wait for miracles. Thomas stumbled backward, his knees giving out. He fell into a dining chair, the foreclosure notice slipping from his fingers. Linda let out a piercing, agonizing wail, clutching her husband's shoulders as the reality of their absolute destruction set in. They had sacrificed their eldest daughter to please their golden child, and their golden child's lover had just bankrupted them permanently. The bank triggered the foreclosure protocol. This morning, I said, delivering the final fatal blow with a cold, triumphant smile. They are seizing your property. You have exactly 72 hours to vacate the premises before the county sheriff arrives to forcefully remove you and your belongings. I stood up straight, looking at the spectacular wreckage of the family that had abused me for decades. Happy 35th anniversary. Mom and Dad, I said, my voice ringing clear and resolute across the grand ballroom. You are officially homeless starting tomorrow morning. The grand ballroom, once a sanctuary of Seattle's elite, rapidly morphed into a theater of absolute disgust. The stifling silence broke, shattered by the sharp, unforgiving whispers of country club members and corporate executives. These were people who guarded their social and financial reputations with their lives. Seeing Thomas and Linda exposed as fraudulent, bankrupt enablers, and Liam revealed as a federal embezzler triggered an immediate, visceral retreat. Smartphones were raised high in the air. Camera flashes strobed across the room, capturing the exact moment the Golden family was reduced to rubble. Chairs scraped loudly against the marble floor as guests began standing up in droves. They did not offer condolences. They did not say goodbye. They grabbed their expensive coats and headed straight for the grand exit, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of my family's crimes. Thomas watched his entire social circle abandon him. The country club president, his longtime golf partners, the wealthy neighbors he had spent decades trying to impress, all walking out without a single backward glance. The illusion was completely dead. The terrifying reality of his impending homelessness crashed down upon him. He turned back to the stage, his face entirely stripped of its former patriarchal arrogance. Linda was already moving. She scrambled up the carpeted steps of the stage, her expensive sequined gown catching on her heels. She collapsed directly at my feet. My mother, the woman who had spent my entire life standing tall to look down on me, was now physically kneeling on the floor, weeping hysterically. Thomas fell to his knees right beside her, his hands trembling as he reached out toward me. "Amelia, please," Linda wailed, tears carving deep, dark tracks through her immaculate makeup. "We were wrong. We were so incredibly wrong. You have to forgive us. We are your parents. You cannot let the bank take our home. You have billions of dollars in that company. You are the chief executive officer. $400,000 is nothing to you. It is pocket change. Please just pay the bank. Save our house. We will do anything you want." Thomas nodded frantically, his voice breaking into a pathetic, desperate sob. "We will cut Isabella off. We will never speak to Liam again. We will make you the sole heir to whatever we have left. Just wire the funds, Amelia. You have the power to fix this right now. Do not let us die on the streets." I looked down at the two people who had created me. I looked at their tear-stained faces, their pleading eyes, their total submission. This was the moment I had dreamed of when I was a teenager, crying alone in my bedroom after they drained my college fund to pay for Isabella's shopping sprees. But standing here now, possessing all the power in the world, I felt absolutely nothing for them. Not anger, not pity, just a cold, clinical detachment. I stepped back, pulling the hem of my emerald gown away from my mother's grasping fingers. "You want me to use my corporate wealth to save you?" I stated, my voice echoing clearly over the chaotic noise of the emptying ballroom. "You want me to hand over $400,000 of my hard-earned money to protect the house where you plan to host my cheating husband and my deceitful sister? You made your investment, Dad. You chose your favorite daughter, Mom. You handed the deed of your house to a thief, and you did it with a smile on your face because you thought it would destroy me. Now you get to live with the return on your investment. I am not giving you a single dime. A shrill, terrified shriek tore my attention away from my parents. Isabella was crawling across the marble floor toward Isaiah. The unilateral divorce petition lay crumpled beneath her knees. She lunged forward, wrapping her arms tightly around Isaiah's legs, burying her face against his tailored suit pants. Isaiah, you cannot leave me like this. Isabella sobbed, her voice cracking with pure panic. I have no money. I have no credit. I have nowhere to go. It was all Liam. He manipulated me. He told me he was going to be a multi-millionaire. He forced me to take your retirement funds to prove I was committed to him. He made me fake the pregnancy so he could steal the house. I was just a victim. I swear to you, I was a victim. I still love you. Liam had been kneeling on the floor, surrounded by the printed evidence of his federal embezzlement. He had lost his career, his reputation, his marriage, and his freedom. And now the woman he had committed these massive felonies for was publicly throwing him to the wolves. She was calling him a manipulator. She was blaming him for the fake pregnancy that had driven him to destroy his entire life. Something inside Liam fundamentally snapped. The last remaining shred of his sanity evaporated. He let out a raw, guttural roar of absolute rage. You lying parasite, Liam screamed, his face turning a terrifying, violent shade of purple. Liam lunged across the floor with the speed of a rabid animal. He slammed into Isabella, knocking her away from Isaiah. His hands shot forward, wrapping violently around her throat. Isabella let out a choked, terrified gasp as Liam pinned her to the marble floor. You ruined my life, Liam roared, his fingers tightening relentlessly around her neck. You told me there was a baby. You told me we were going to take the estate. I stole corporate funds for you. I forged legal documents for you. I am going to federal's prison because of you. The grand ballroom descended into absolute, unmitigated pandemonium. Linda screamed in horror, scrambling off the stage to try and pry Liam's hands off her precious golden child. Thomas shouted for the country club security guards. Isabella thrashed wildly on the floor, her face turning red as she gasped for air, clawing desperately at Liam's arms. Isaiah took a slow, deliberate step backward, completely removing himself from the violent wreckage of their relationship. He did not lift a single finger to help the woman who had betrayed him. I stood tall on the stage, watching the physical manifestation of their greed tear them apart. They were destroying each other piece by piece. Then a sharp, piercing sound cut through the screaming and the chaos. I turned my gaze toward the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows at the back of the ballroom. In the distance, cutting through the heavy Seattle fog, the blinding flash of red and blue lights began to strobe across the dark sky. The loud, unmistakable wail of police sirens pierced the night air, growing louder and closer by the exact second. The authorities had arrived. The deafening wail of sirens shattered the remaining tension in the ballroom. Red and blue lights strobed violently through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, casting harsh, erratic shadows across the imported white linen and the crystal chandeliers. The heavy oak doors of the Sovereign did not just open, they were breached. A tactical line of uniformed Seattle police officers surged into the grand venue, their hands resting cautiously on their utility belts. Right behind them walked 3 men and 1 woman wearing sharply tailored dark suits, their federal badges clipped visibly to their belts. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had arrived. The sheer physical presence of federal agents in a country club ballroom sent the remaining few guests and the paralyzed waitstaff scrambling toward the far walls. Thomas and Linda froze entirely, their faces draining of whatever microscopic trace of color they had left. Liam was still on the marble floor, his hands locked aggressively around Lily's neck, blinded by his own psychotic rage. He did not even notice the authorities swarming the room until 2 heavily built police officers grabbed him by the shoulders. They yanked him backward with absolute force, tearing him away from my sister. Liam thrashed wildly for a fraction of a second before a 3rd officer slammed him face first into the nearest dining table. Silverware crashed to the floor. the pristine white tablecloth stained with spilled red wine. Lily gasped violently for air, clutching her bruised throat as she scrambled backward across the polished stone. She coughed, looking up at the officers with wide, terrified eyes, completely convinced they had rushed in to save her from a murderous husband. She was entirely wrong. The lead FBI agent, a tall man with a chiseled jaw and cold, analytical eyes, stepped forward. He did not look at my parents. He did not look at the crying, gasping woman on the floor. He looked directly at the man pinned against the dining table. Liam the agent stated, his voice a booming, authoritative baritone that commanded absolute submission. "You are being placed under federal arrest for multiple counts of corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and interstate money laundering." Liam stopped struggling immediately. The fight completely drained out of his body. He pressed his cheek against the cold marble tabletop, his eyes darting frantically toward the stage where I was standing. I stepped down from the podium with slow, deliberate grace. An abandoned crystal glass of vintage red wine sat on a nearby tray. I picked it up, holding it loosely by the delicate stem. I walked over to where my soon-to-be ex-husband was being restrained. I looked down at him, my expression radiating the untouchable power of a woman who had orchestrated his absolute demise. I took a slow, methodical sip of the dark red wine. "I submitted the irrefutable evidence of your federal embezzlement to the White-Collar Crime Division exactly 3 days ago, Liam," I said smoothly, letting the rich taste of the wine linger on my tongue. "Every fake invoice, every offshore cryptocurrency transfer, and every forged home equity document was securely packaged and delivered to their field office. I told you I owned your network. I told you I owned your career. Now the federal government owns your future." Liam let out a pathetic whimpering sound. He could not even form a coherent sentence. The arrogance that had fueled his entire existence was completely extinguished. But the authorities were not finished. A female detective from the Seattle Police Department stepped around the table and walked directly toward Lily. My sister was still sitting on the floor, rubbing her neck and watching Liam's arrest with a mixture of shock and twisted relief. Her relief lasted exactly 2 seconds. Lily the detective announced, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from her tactical belt. "You are under arrest for grand theft identity fraud and the unlawful dissipation of marital assets. Stand up and put your hands behind your back." Lily shrieked a high-pitched sound of pure, unadulterated panic. She scrambled backward, hitting the leg of a chair. "No. No, you cannot arrest me. I am the victim here. He just tried to kill me. He lied to me. I did not do anything wrong." Isaiah stepped out from the shadows of the room, his dark tailored suit cutting an imposing figure against the chaotic backdrop. He looked down at his treacherous wife with an expression of absolute freezing disdain. "I took care of your arrest warrant this morning," Isaiah stated, his deep voice slicing through her hysterical crying. "I handed the Financial Crimes Unit the exact routing numbers you used to drain $300,000 from my private retirement funds. I gave them the fraudulent wire transfers you authorized. You are not a victim. You are a common thief, and you are going to answer for every single dollar you stole." The detective grabbed Lily by the arm, hauling her roughly to her feet. Lily kicked and thrashed, her blush-pink designer dress tearing at the seam as she fought against the officer's grip. It was a humiliating, pathetic display. "You have the right to remain silent." The lead FBI agent began, his voice ringing out in unison with the local detective who was simultaneously reading Lily her rights. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." The sharp metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut echoed simultaneously across the room. Both Liam and Lily were securely bound, their hands pinned tightly behind their backs. As the officers began to drag them toward the grand double doors, the two traitors turned on each other with the viciousness of cornered rats. "This is your fault," Liam screamed, spitting venom at my sister as an officer shoved him forward. "You greedy, manipulative sociopath! You ruined my life. You told me there was a baby. I am going to make sure you rot in a cell." Lily shrieked back at him, her face completely twisted with rage and terror. "You are a failure. You could not even steal money right. I wish I never met you. You deserve to be in prison. You are nothing but a pathetic, arrogant loser." They screamed and cursed at each other, their voices echoing down the long, luxurious hallway of the country club as the police dragged them out into the freezing Seattle rain. The elegant anniversary party had officially ended in a perp walk. I turned my gaze toward the main table. Thomas and Linda stood completely paralyzed. They were locked in a state of catatonic horror. Their eyes were wide, unblinking, and entirely devoid of life. They stood shoulder to shoulder, gripping each other for physical support, watching the absolute, inescapable destruction of their perfect suburban illusion. They had just watched their golden child, the daughter they had prioritized and protected, at the expense of my entire childhood, get dragged away in handcuffs for grand theft. They had just watched their wealthy, brilliant future son-in-law get arrested by the FBI for massive corporate fraud. They were completely exposed. They were bankrupt, they were facing imminent foreclosure, and they were utterly alone in a room full of overturned chairs and shattered glass. The social humiliation was absolute. They had nothing left to brag about. They had no one left to look down upon. Their entire world had burned to ashes right in front of their eyes, and I had been the one to strike the match. The flashing red and blue lights eventually dissolved into the thick Seattle fog outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The wail of the police sirens faded into a distant hollow echo, taking my treacherous husband and my deceitful sister away to a federal holding cell. The grand ballroom of the Sovereign, which had been buzzing with the city elite just an hour ago, was now a spectacular graveyard of shattered crystal and overturned mahogany chairs. The towering 5-tier anniversary cake sat entirely untouched in the corner, a mocking monument to a 35-year marriage built entirely on greed, favoritism, and lies. I took a deep, cleansing breath. The suffocating weight I had carried in my chest for my entire life was completely gone. I set my empty wine glass down on a nearby table. The sharp clink of the crystal against the marble was the only sound in the cavernous room. I turned to look at Isaiah. He stood a few feet away, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored midnight blue suit. His face was calm, his posture relaxed. The burden of his toxic marriage to my sister had been violently severed, and he looked like a man who had just woken up from a long, exhausting nightmare. We exchanged a single knowing look. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic speeches between us. We had executed the plan flawlessly. We had protected our assets, exposed the criminals, and reclaimed our freedom. "It is time to go," Isaiah said quietly, his voice steady and resolute. "We have nothing left to do here." I nodded, picking up my emerald silk clutch from a pristine white tablecloth. We turned our backs on the wreckage and began to walk toward the towering oak double doors at the back of the ballroom. But before we could reach the exit, a frantic, scrambling sound echoed behind us. Linda lunged across the polished marble floor. Her expensive sequined gown snagged on a broken champagne flute, tearing the delicate fabric, but she did not care. She threw her body directly in front of the heavy wooden doors, physically blocking our path. She spread her arms wide, her chest heaving with desperate, ragged gasps. "Amelia, wait!" Linda cried out, her voice a shrill, panicked screech that scraped against the quiet walls. "You cannot just leave us here. You cannot walk out that door." I stopped a few feet away from her, my expression hardening into a mask of pure, untouchable ice. Isaiah stopped right beside me, crossing his arms and staring down at my mother with absolute disgust. Thomas dragged himself over to join her. He looked like a hollow shell of a man. The arrogant patriarch who had threatened to sue me for my estate just days ago was now trembling violently. He pulled his smartphone from his pocket, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the device. The bank did not just send a notice of intent. Thomas stammered, his voice cracking with raw terror. The fraud department at the bank flagged the home equity loan because it was tied to Liam and his federal embezzlement charges. They escalated the foreclosure protocol immediately. I just checked my email. The bank sent a property management team to the house this afternoon. They changed all the locks. They padlocked the driveway gates. We are completely locked out of our own home. Linda let out a pathetic whimpering sob. We have nowhere to go. Amelia, she begged, tears streaming down her ruined, makeup-stained face. We have no access to our funds. We cannot even get inside our house to grab a change of clothes or our daily medication. The country club management just told us they are voiding our membership effective immediately due to the police presence. We cannot even stay in the guest suites here. You have to help us. We are your parents. You cannot let us sleep on the streets tonight. Just let us stay in your guest house, just for one night, or use your corporate account to book us a hotel room downtown. You have billions of dollars. Please, Amelia, show some mercy. I stared at the woman who had birthed me. I looked at the man who had raised me to believe I was nothing but a secondary defective placeholder for their perfect golden child. They were standing there completely stripped of their wealth and their social armor, begging for the exact same mercy they had violently denied me for decades. I did not shout. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with a quiet, lethal precision that commanded absolute attention. When I was 18 years old, I stated, locking my eyes directly onto my mother's terrified face. I collapsed in the middle of my high school library. My appendix had ruptured. I was rushed into emergency surgery. I woke up in a sterile, freezing hospital room, completely alone, in agonizing pain and terrified. I called you Mom. I begged you to come to the hospital. I needed my mother. Linda swallowed hard, her eyes darting away from my piercing gaze. Do you remember what you did? I asked, taking a slow, deliberate step closer to her. You walked into my recovery room wearing a designer cocktail dress. You were furious. You were not worried about my health. You were angry because my ruptured appendix had delayed your flight to Paris. You and my sister had planned a luxury shopping trip, and my emergency surgery was an inconvenience to your schedule. You stood over my hospital bed, looked at your watch, and told me to stop being a dramatic burden. Thomas looked down at his shoes, unable to bear the weight of his own profound failure as a father. I reached into my emerald silk clutch. My fingers brushed against the cold leather of my wallet. I slowly pulled out a single crisp $100 bill. I held it up in the dim light of the ballroom. You did not hug me. I continued, my voice devoid of any human warmth. You did not ask the doctors if I was going to be okay. You opened your purse, pulled out a $100 bill, and threw it onto my hospital tray. You told me to use it to pay for a taxi ride home whenever the hospital discharged me, because you two were not going to miss your flight. Then you turned around and walked out the door. Linda began to weep loudly, burying her face in her trembling hands. I am sorry, she sobbed. I am so sorry. I extended my arm and simply let go of the money. The crisp $100 bill fluttered through the air, drifting back and forth before landing gently on the polished marble floor right at my mother's feet. Here is your Uber money, I declared, delivering the final fatal blow with absolute freezing finality. Consider it a direct repayment for the exact amount you threw at me the night I was bleeding in a hospital bed at 18 years old. Do not ever call my phone again. Do not ever look for me. And do not ever say my name again. I turned my back on them. I did not wait for a response. I did not care to hear another pathetic apology or another desperate plea. I pushed open the heavy oak double doors of the ballroom and stepped out into the cool, crisp Seattle night. Isaiah walked right beside me, matching my confident, powerful stride. I took a deep breath of the fresh, rain-washed air. The toxic, suffocating chains of my biological family were permanently shattered, and I walked forward into my massive, hard-earned empire without looking back even once. The federal justice system moves with a cold, relentless precision that no amount of country club money or suburban arrogance can stop. 4 months evaporated in the blink of an eye. The grand theatrical chaos of the anniversary dinner had faded into a sterile reality of court dockets, sworn testimonies, and ironclad indictments. I did not attend the preliminary hearings. I did not waste my valuable corporate time sitting in a stuffy room, watching my former family desperately try to bargain their way out of absolute ruin. I let my legal team and the federal prosecutors do exactly what they were paid to do. But on the day of the final sentencing, I made an exception. I walked into the federal courthouse in downtown Seattle wearing a sharp-tailored white suit, projecting the untouchable aura of a woman who had orchestrated this entire symphony of destruction. I sat in the back row of the gallery completely silent and entirely unbothered. Liam was brought into the courtroom first. The arrogant, impeccably groomed vice president of Technova was entirely gone. He wore a standard-issue drab olive jumpsuit. His posture was completely hunched, his shoulders sagging under the immense weight of his reality. He looked small, pathetic, and utterly defeated. The federal judge, a no-nonsense woman with zero tolerance for corporate greed, looked down at him from the bench with absolute disgust. She read the charges aloud for the public record: $1.5 million in corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, mortgage fraud, money laundering. Liam wept openly, his tears falling onto the wooden defense table. The judge slammed her gavel and delivered a brutal, inescapable sentence: 10 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. Liam collapsed into his chair, sobbing uncontrollably, as the federal marshals hauled him to his feet and dragged him out of the courtroom. He did not even look in my direction. He knew better. Next came my sister. Isabella was escorted to the defense table, and the sight of her nearly made me smile. The designer dresses, the flawless makeup, and the stolen diamonds were replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting beige uniform. Her hair was a tangled, unwashed mess. She immediately launched into her rehearsed routine, crying hysterically, begging the judge for mercy, and playing the role of the helpless, manipulated victim. But the federal prosecutor played the high-definition audio recording of her sitting in that medical clinic, casually planning to fake a miscarriage to extort me out of a $3 million estate. The judge watched the footage and cut her desperate plea entirely short. Isabella was convicted of financial fraud, forgery, and grand theft. The sentence was swift and decisive: 3 years in a state correctional facility. Isabella shrieked a wild, panicked sound, screaming for our parents to save her as the bailiffs forcefully shackled her wrists and marched her through the side doors. Her golden child status meant absolutely nothing behind steel bars. Thomas and Linda were sitting 2 rows ahead of me in the gallery. They did not face criminal charges, but their punishment was arguably far more poetic. They had to sit there and watch their 2 favorite people in the world get shipped off to prison, completely powerless to stop it. And their powerlessness extended far beyond the courtroom walls. The bank had executed the foreclosure with ruthless speed. My parents had been formally evicted from their pristine suburban home, escorted off the property by county sheriffs. Their bank accounts were drained by the collapsed cryptocurrency investment. The country club had permanently blacklisted them. Their wealthy friends had completely blocked their numbers, treating their names like a highly infectious disease. They had fallen from the absolute peak of Seattle high society straight into the gutter, with no savings, no assets, and a massive unpayable debt hanging over their heads. Thomas and Linda were forced to move into a rotting, dilapidated motel on the industrial outskirts of the city. The room was paid for entirely by government housing assistance. The couple who used to drink $200 bottles of wine and look down their noses at the working class were now surviving on government-issued food stamps and expired canned goods. Their absolute humiliation did not stop there. To meet the basic requirements of their government assistance and to pay for their prepaid cell phones, they were forced to find employment. Nobody in the corporate sector would hire a disgraced executive tied to a massive federal fraud scandal. Thomas, the man who used to boast about his financial genius, now spent his nights wearing a stained gray uniform, pushing a wet mop as a night shift janitor at a discount strip mall. Linda, the woman who refused to touch anything, unless it was designer, worked right beside him, scrubbing public toilets and emptying trash cans for minimum wage. The irony was a spectacular, flawlessly executed masterpiece. I sat in my massive glass-walled corner office at the top of the Apex Logistics Tower, sipping a cup of imported black coffee. The Seattle skyline stretched out before me, a kingdom I had conquered through pure intellect and unwavering resolve. A soft knock echoed through the room. My lead corporate attorney Harrison stepped through the double doors. He carried a thick, neatly organized stack of envelopes in his hand. The weekly mail delivery has arrived. Amelia Harrison stated, his voice a smooth professional monotone. He approached my desk and spread the envelopes across the polished mahogany surface. They were all written on cheap lined notebook paper. The return addresses told the entire pathetic story. There were dozens of letters from the federal penitentiary, Liam begging for a character reference to reduce his sentence. There were frantic, tear-stained letters from the state correctional facility, Isabella pleading for money to buy basic hygiene products at the prison commissary, and there was a massive pile of envelopes postmarked from the rundown motel on the edge of the city. Thomas and Linda writing lengthy, desperate apologies, begging their CEO daughter for a tiny, insignificant loan just so they could turn the heating on in their freezing motel room. Harrison stood patiently waiting for my directive. "Should I open them, or would you prefer to read them yourself?" he asked. I looked down at the desperate, pathetic pleas from the people who had tried to completely annihilate me. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. I did not feel the slightest urge to read their manufactured apologies. I picked up my coffee cup, taking a slow, satisfying sip. Neither I replied, my voice as cold and hard as a diamond. I gestured toward the corner of my office where a heavy-duty industrial-grade cross-cut paper shredder sat plugged into the wall. Harrison did not hesitate. He gathered the entire stack of letters, walked over to the machine, and fed them directly into the grinding steel blades. The loud, mechanical whirring sound filled the executive office, instantly transforming their desperate begging, their pathetic apologies, and their tearful pleas into tiny, meaningless strips of useless confetti. I turned my chair back toward the floor to ceiling windows, watching the city move below me, entirely deaf to the cries of the ghosts I had left completely behind. 1 year later. The air at the pinnacle of the Seattle skyline was thin, crisp, and completely intoxicating. I stood behind the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my corner office on the 50th floor of the Apex Logistics Tower. The city sprawled out beneath me like a massive glowing circuit board, pulsating with life and commerce. The relentless rain that had mirrored the darkest days of my life was gone, replaced by a brilliant, unblemished sunset that cast a golden, victorious aura over the Pacific Northwest. I was no longer the scapegoat of a deeply toxic family. I was no longer the overlooked wife or the discarded daughter. I was the absolute architect of my own destiny. I wore a custom-tailored midnight black suit woven from imported Italian silk. The sharp architectural lines of the blazer armored my shoulders, projecting an aura of untouchable authority. A single flawless diamond rested at the hollow of my throat, catching the ambient light of the room. Every detail of my existence was now meticulously curated, protected, and entirely my own. The empire I had built in the shadows was now operating in the blinding light of total global dominance. Apex Logistics had not merely survived the corporate shakeup following the federal arrests. We had surged. By aggressively purging the rot from our acquired subsidiaries and restructuring the entire executive board, our quarterly profits had shattered every single projected financial ceiling. The heavy frosted glass door to my executive suite slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. I did not need to turn around to know who was walking into the room. The steady, measured footsteps against the polished hardwood floor were unmistakable. Isaiah stepped into the expansive office, exuding a quiet, lethal confidence that perfectly matched the magnitude of our surroundings. The past 12 months had forged him into a man of terrifying capability and absolute focus. He was no longer just the brilliant cybersecurity expert who had helped me hack into fraudulent ledgers in a rundown diner. He was now the Chief Information Security Officer of the entire Apex Logistics global conglomerate. He controlled the digital infrastructure of a multi-billion-dollar supply chain network. He wore a charcoal gray bespoke suit, a sleek platinum watch resting on his wrist, and he carried a tablet displaying the flawless, impenetrable security algorithms he had designed to protect our vast corporate assets. We secured the final acquisition of the European shipping firm this afternoon. Isaiah announced, his deep voice resonating with professional satisfaction as he set the tablet down on the edge of my sprawling mahogany desk. The integration is complete. Our digital perimeter is absolutely locked down. Not a single unauthorized byte of data goes in or out without my explicit approval. The board is thrilled, and the international markets are already responding to the merger. I turned away from the breathtaking view of the city and offered him a genuine, unburdened smile. Perfect execution, as always, Isaiah. You have turned our cybersecurity division into an impenetrable fortress. I never had a single doubt that you were the exact visionary this corporation needed to secure our global future. Isaiah walked over to the private marble-topped bar situated in the corner of my office. He reached for a bottle of incredibly rare vintage champagne that I had ordered specifically for this occasion. The sharp, satisfying pop of the cork echoed through the spacious room, a sound of pure celebration that stood in stark contrast to the miserable, pathetic lives our former spouses were currently enduring behind cold steel bars. He poured the sparkling golden liquid into two tall crystal flutes with steady, precise hands. He walked back over to the massive glass window, handing me one of the crystal flutes. We stood shoulder to shoulder, two brilliant, resilient individuals who had been dragged through absolute hell by the people we had trusted the most. We had been used, betrayed, and targeted for total destruction. But instead of letting the fire consume us, we had walked straight through the flames, gathered the ashes of our enemies, and used them to fertilize the foundation of an unstoppable dynasty. I looked at Isaiah. He was not just my chief information security officer. He was my most trusted confidant, my strategic equal, and the sharpest ally I had ever known. We had forged a bond in the trenches of betrayal that was infinitely stronger than any fragile, superficial marriage certificate or biological family tie. We had protected each other when the people who shared our blood had actively tried to slaughter us. Isaiah looked out at the glowing metropolis below us, watching the tiny, insignificant cars moving along the highways. He took a slow breath, his dark eyes reflecting the brilliant lights of the city we now ruled. Family is not always blood, is it, Amelia? Isaiah said, his tone striking a perfect balance of profound wisdom and quiet triumph. I looked down at the sprawling empire I had built from nothing. I thought about Liam rotting in a federal penitentiary. I thought about Lily pacing the floor of a state prison cell. I thought about Thomas and Linda scrubbing public toilets in the dead of night, forever banished from the high society they had worshipped. They had demanded my submission, and I had handed them their absolute annihilation. I raised my crystal flute, the diamonds on my wrist flashing brilliantly in the fading sunlight. I met Isaiah's gaze, my eyes gleaming with sharp, ruthless clarity and a deeply proud, sovereign smile. Family are the ones who stand by your side and help you clean up the wreckage, I declared, my voice ringing with total, unshakable power. And as for the people who deliberately created that wreckage, the absolute sweetest revenge is simply walking away, locking the door, and letting them drown completely in their own greed. I clinked my glass against his. The crisp, resonant chime of the crystal rang out like a final victorious bell, sealing the absolute end of their pathetic existence and the glorious, unbreakable reign of our new empire. The screen fades to black. The remarkable journey of Amelia teaches us a profound and uncompromising lesson about the true definition of family, the necessity of absolute boundaries, and the undeniable power of financial independence. Society often conditions us to believe that blood relations demand our unconditional loyalty, even when that loyalty is met with disrespect, exploitation, and profound betrayal. However, this story shatters that dangerous illusion. It reveals that sharing DNA does not automatically grant someone the right to your resources, your peace of mind, or your future. When Amelia faced the ultimate betrayal from her husband, her sister, and her own parents, she did not crumble. She survived because she had spent years quietly building her own fortress of independence. Her success was not just about accumulating wealth. It was about securing the ultimate freedom to walk away from toxic environments without being crippled by reliance on those who sought to destroy her. The most critical takeaway is that you are the architect of your own rescue. You must cultivate your own strength, safeguard your assets, and never diminish your capabilities to appease the fragile egos of those around you. Furthermore, the narrative redefines the concept of family. Real family members are the individuals who stand by your side in the darkest trenches, who respect your boundaries, and who actively help you clear the wreckage instead of causing it. By cutting ties with her toxic relatives and aligning with someone who demonstrated genuine loyalty, Amelia proved that removing abusive people from your life is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You are never obligated to set yourself on fire just to keep manipulative people warm. If you have ever had to rebuild your life and set unbreakable boundaries after a painful betrayal, share your story in the comments below and subscribe to our channel for more empowering journeys of ultimate vindication.